The rain had ceased only moments before dawn, leaving the wide mouth of the Trident in a hush that felt both reverent and foreboding. Mist clung to every reed-choked bank, draping the scene like a mourner's veil. Corpses, men who yesterday bore banners of fire, and men who bore banners of stags, floated in languid eddies or lay half-submerged against stones, their empty eyes as pale as the sky that bled toward morning. Robert Baratheon stood among them, boots sunk ankle-deep in black mud, his warhammer planted beside him like a shrine. The steel head was mottled with blood, but beneath the gore and river silt it shimmered faintly, as though something within the metal stirred and stretched in the newborn light. He could still feel Rhaegar Targaryen's breastplate giving way, the resonant crunch of rubies scattering like seeds upon wet gravel, the prince's breath leaving him in a surprised wheeze. Sound traveled strangely in that instant. All the thunder of hooves and clamor of steel, dulled to a single reverberant note, as if some unseen bell tolled the hour of destiny. Then came silence. Robert remembered how every man on the riverbank seemed to pause, as though each had become a statue carved by the same hand. Even the river, broad and tireless, seemed to hold its currents in abeyance. Now, with the sun's rim barely cresting the eastern heights, the silence felt sacramental rather than shocked. A hush before prayer. Robert drew breath, and something coppery slid in his throat. Blood, perhaps his own, perhaps the prince's. He had not yet counted his wounds. He did not yet desire to. The ache that filled his limbs felt distant, muffled by a glow in his chest that was not pain at all but tremulous heat, like a forge stirred to sudden life. Somewhere to his right, Ned Stark picked his way through the littered bodies. His cloak, sodden and streaked with enemy colors, hung off one shoulder, revealing rust-flecked mail. When he reached Robert's side, he said nothing at first, only let his wolf-gray eyes drift across the field. It was Ned who bent to wipe dried blood, Targaryen blood, from the hammer's haft. Robert might have laughed at that. Stoic, honor-haunted Ned cleaning the very weapon that had ended the line of dragons. But the laugh would not come. Laughter lived in the living, and Robert felt caught in some borderland between life and something vaster, some windswept night where light itself was hammered thin. "They'll sing of this," Ned murmured. "Of rubies in the river, of blackmail and bright steel, of the hammer that shattered dawn's promise." Robert's voice sounded foreign to his own ears. "Let them sing. We've given them enough to chew for 100 years." He tasted the air again, tasting the acrid, iron sweetness that the poets would ignore. "Have you seen to our dead? The healers are at work, those that can still be saved. The rest—" Ned gestured vaguely downriver where small fires burned. Pyres hastily built of driftwood and torn lances. Too many to name half of them. "But we'll say the words." "Words," Robert echoed. It made him remember his father's godswood at Storm's End, where the stone faced down the tides and the wind filled the trees with clashing voices. Gods, whether old or new, required words, sacrifices, memory, song and silence alike. Across the field, men knelt to retrieve keepsakes, a sister's token, a luck stone, a severed finger wearing a ring. And Robert felt an odd pang, as if the entire realm lay at his feet, broken and pleading. Wind sifted through his wet hair, lifting strands from his brow. He thought of the stag banners high atop Storm's End, snapping in sea gale. He thought, too, of Lyanna Stark, rain-soaked in a tower he had not yet dared imagine. Somewhere in the welter of corpses lay every vow he had uttered since boyhood, shattered like those rubies. A prayer rose in him unbidden, the sort of half-formed plea men make at the edge of miracles. "Give her back, and I'll never drink again. Give her back, and I'll kneel until my knees crack." Ned's gloved hand closed on his forearm. A simple gesture, meant only to anchor him in the waking world, yet sparks seemed to crawl beneath Robert's skin. He looked down. Ned's hand glowed faintly. No, not Ned's hand, but the place where it touched Robert's flesh, as though veins ran just beneath the surface in molten threads. Robert jerked away, heart thundering like hooves across stone. "Did you feel?" Ned frowned. Only that you're trembling. You need rest, Robert. Rest. Dot. The word drifted away, meaningless. An ember had lodged behind Robert's sternum. Each beat of his heart fanned it, until warmth spread outward, settling in his shoulders, his arms, the hammer grip. Something's wrong, he murmured, though wrong felt the wrong word. Unearthly. Frightening. Divine. I feel too alive. Ned searched his face for jest. You've looked better, I'll grant. Come, the maesters. Not wounds. Robert's hand closed round the hammer's haft instinctively. The war hammer thrummed beneath his grip. He remembered forging it at Storm's End under Donal Noy's watchful eye. A solid thing, blunt and ugly beside a knight's fair sword. Yet now, the head shivered faintly with an unseen pulse, like a slumbering heart beneath iron plates. Robert raised it, and without thinking, swept the hammer toward the sky. A thin plume of steam hissed from the damp metal where sunlight kissed it. Ned gasped. Robert felt the hammer grow warm, then hot, until he feared it might burn his gauntlet to cinders. He dropped the weapon. It landed in a puff of river mud, and the mud itself sizzled, as though cast upon coals. Ned Stark stepped back, jaw tight. That is sorcery. Robert's chest rose and fell in great gusts. Sorcery. He had mocked it when the graybeards whispered of dragons and glass candles. Yet here it stood before him, humming in a warhammer's belly like a caged storm. It did not burn me, Robert said, marveling. Only grew hot. As if it wished to wake. Leave it, Ned urged. We'll have Thoros look at it. Thoros. That mad red priest from Mar who drank and gambled as fiercely as he preached. Robert almost laughed again. Thoros had spoken often of sacred flames, of a red god who chose champions. Thoros, who wrought trick candles and called them miracles. Yet the red priest's sword only flared with wildfire. It cooled and flickered like any mundane flame. What Robert had felt in the hammer was deeper. A tide surging upward from some unfathomable ocean beneath the earth. A shout rang across the field. Sir Brynden Tully and John Arryn were approaching, bannersmen in tow, picking through the carnage. News would be heralded, orders given, prisoners taken or pardoned. The realm would move again, as realms do, toward lords' halls and small folk hearths. But Robert remained fixed on the warhammer, at his feet. He could no more walk away from it than surrender his own heart. A fine spray of rain began to fall, mist perhaps, from the river stirred by dawn's first gusts. Yet the droplets hissed on the hammerhead, vanishing on contact. Robert crouched, one hand outstretched, and though Ned called his name, he ignored it. His fingers closed upon the leather grip, expecting scalding heat. Instead, a pleasant warmth seeped into his palm, as though he clasped a cup of mulled wine on a winter's eve. And then he saw it. The faintest filigree of light etching itself along the steel, like veins of quicksilver. At first it traced aimless curls. Then the lines resolved into a sigil, a heart crowned in flame, antlers spread like great wings. Its eye glimmered, bright as a forged coal. Robert's heart hammered in his chest, each pulse echoing in the weapon, until he was no longer certain whose heart he felt. Ned's voice cut through the hush. Robert, release it. I cannot, said Robert, though no iron bound him. It's chosen me. Even as he spoke, he recognized the echo of another man's prophecy. Melisandre of Ahai would mouth such words in years to come, of champions and chosen blades. Yet Robert felt only the raw fact of it, undeniable as sunrise. He rose, hammer aloft. The crowned stag of light lingered a moment longer, then dissipated, leaving bare steel. But the warmth remained, pulsing like blood. Around them, men halted in their tasks to stare. They saw little, perhaps only a warlord hefting his favorite weapon. Yet some primal sense made them hush. In that moment the dawn broke fully, burning away mist, and the first beam of sun knifed through cloud to strike Robert square across the brow. His hair, tangled and wet, shone like dark bronze. His eyes, usually the merry blue of a summer sea, had deepened, catching flecks of gold. Light anchored him in place, as though the world turned about this one point. A stag-made man, crowned by morning. Sir Brynden, halted mid-stride. Jon Arryn's lips parted in wonder. Even the fish banners stilled. Robert lifted his gaze to the sky, half expecting dragons to wheel in circles above. Instead, he saw only swallow shapes and a pale sliver of moon fading in daylight. Yet something vast stirred beyond sight, as though the heavens themselves drew breath. "Lord of Light," muttered a man behind him. "One of Thoros' converts, perhaps." Robert lowered the hammer. The warmth receded but did not vanish. It settled in his bones like strong ale spreading from belly to limbs. He turned to Ned, voice rough. "I saw fire in the steel." Ned's jaw worked. "I do not know what you saw, but I know this. Rhaegar is dead, and the realm will look to you. Prophecy or no, we have a kingdom to mend." The word felt too small. Robert closed his eyes. Behind his lids, colors swirled, were deeper than rubies, gold brighter than any crown. From that molten sea emerged figures. A woman in a bed of blood and blue roses. A white hart wandering winter woods. 3 dragons screaming in chains. Each image split apart like hammered metal, reshaping itself around a central shaft of light. The warhammer's handle, stretching like a spear into night. Upon its tip flared a sun, and in that sun Robert saw his own shadow, huge and crowned with stag horns made of living flame. PGSQL. They made camp beneath tattered pennons a league from the river. Smoke from cookfires mingled with the stench of battlefield rot. Already ravens circled, eager black scribes ready to pen this day's account upon entrails. In Robert's pavilion, a hush reigned. He sat shirtless, wounds cleaned and salved, the warhammer resting across his lap like a babe too precious to lay aside. Maester Joseph of Storm's End worked by lamplight, his thin fingers probing the bruises across Robert's ribs. "No break here. 2 cracked ribs, maybe 3. The arm. Keep it bound. You'll set back the bone if you swing that thing again soon." His gaze flitted to the hammerhead and he swallowed. "Though I dare say it's lighter than before?" Robert flexed his hand. The weapon felt no lighter, but neither did it drag on him. "I think I could dance with it." The maester made to object, yet Robert's grin stilled him. "Fetch wine. The strong Dornish sort. It will dull the pain." "That's the point." Joseph retreated. Robert swirled his bruised shoulder and felt the ember rekindle, easing stiffness. It was not unnatural exactly, more akin to the vigor of youth restored, as if a night's rest had been poured straight into his vein. He thought of the smiths at Storm's End who tempered steel by plunging it into flames and water. The hammer had plunged into Rhaegar's breast, into river and blood, and emerged, tempered, anointed. Footsteps. Jon Arryn ducked inside, his hawk's eyes steady. "The men are restless. Too many whispers. They think you've..." He sighed. "Robert, some are calling you Lightborn." The Azor Ahai returned, reborn in battle. His tone balanced between awe and worry. Lordship required such caution. Azor Ahai. Robert tasted the name. Once, in the Eyrie, a maester had related the legend over bread and honey. A hero who forged Lightbringer, a sword burning with the sun's fury, and drove back darkness. But that was in ancient Ahai, or beyond. Far from Storm's End, or the Trident. "I carry no sword aflame." Jon's gaze flicked to the hammer. "A weapon need not be a sword." Robert set the hammer down, careful. "Do you believe it?" The older man weighed him. "I believe the realm yearns for meaning. We have bled the land white in pursuit of vengeance. Some think vengeance enough. Others think vengeance must birth hope, else blood was spent for naught. If men find hope in you, hope in some Eastern legend, let them look to lords and laws, not sorcerers' tales." "Robert," Jon said softly, "men look to you. However they name the thing they see, you cannot unmake their belief by scorn alone. Best you understand it." Robert barked a laugh, but it slipped into thoughtfulness. "Understand? I scarcely understand what happened on the river. I felt Ned's hand on me, and fire surged beneath skin. Light danced on the steel. If that was sorcery, then I wielded unwitting. I am no Magai. Ben Noel. Perhaps that is why it chose you." Robert stared. Jon Arryn rarely spoke of fate. The Eyrie had taught him pragmatism, the weighing of grain and marriage pacts. Yet here he stood, speaking of choice and destiny. "Do you fear it?" Robert asked. "I fear what men do in the name of destiny, but I trust you." At that, Robert looked away. Trust was a heavier crown than gold. "Lyanna must be found," he said hoarsely. And quickly. "Prophecies be damned. She is flesh and blood. I will not have her lost in some story while bards are spinning tales of gods." "Ah." Jon inclined his head. "We ride for the Tower of Joy at moonrise. Ned leads a small band. We keep it quiet, swift. I ride too. Robert. 2 cracked ribs won't kill me. She waits." Robert closed his fist. "If this fire inside me is real, let it carry me to her. Let it burn a path." He met Joan's eyes. "Will you try to stop me?" A faint smile touched the older lord's lips. "I learned long ago, a storm cannot be denied its path, only guided away from ruin." He clasped Robert's forearm. "Ride careful, the realm still needs its king." Indoct. The word settled on Robert's shoulders like a mantle of chain. He felt its weight, but also a curious lightness beneath, the kind a man feels after laying down burdens long borne. If the hammer had chosen him, if flames danced in his blood, then perhaps the crown would fit more easily than he had feared. Yet for now, he set aside kingship. Let councils haggle oaths, let ravens fly. His path veered south, across parched Dornish foothills, to a lonely tower beneath a hard blue sky. PGSQL. They rode 6 in number: Robert, Ned, Howland Reed, and 3 of Ned's sworn swords. The sun beat down, relentless. By day, the foothills shimmered like hammered bronze. By night, the stars blazed so fiercely, the sands seemed alight with silver fire. Robert felt at home in both brightness and darkness. The ember at his core neither cooled nor faded. It pulsed in answer to sky and dune, a steady drum marking time. His ribs ceased aching by the second dawn. The maester's bandages felt needless, and he cast them aside, to Ned's dismay. The hammer rode in a blanket across his saddle. Sometimes, when the wind changed, he swore he heard it humming, a low thrumming like a distant forge bellows. At dusk of the 3rd day, a comet burned low on the horizon, tail red as fresh blood. The men halted unbidden. Ned dismounted, one hand shading his brow. "An omen," he whispered. Robert said nothing. The comet's flame mirrored the glow in his heart. In that moment he knew that what danced inside him was of the heavens, as enduring as starlight. Comets pass, leaving memory, yet he felt certain the fire within would not pass until its purpose was spent. He wondered what shape that purpose would take. War, or peace, or something nameless. They reached the Tower of Joy at sunrise on the 4th day. Pale dawn painted its stones, the color of sorrow. 3 Kingsguard stood sentinel, white cloaks stirring in cold wind. There were words then, honor and duty and inevitable blood. But Robert recalled them only dimly, for the tower's windows were full of sky blue shadow. And in those shadows he imagined glimpsing Lyanna's face, her eyes swimming with unshed tears. When steel met steel upon the dusty ground, Robert fought like a man half the knight's age, though no foe matched the fury he had poured into Rhaegar. He wielded a longsword borrowed from Ned's spare, for the hammer felt ill-matched to dancing with blades in close quarters. Yet even with borrowed steel he moved as though guided by invisible rails. Every strike landed true, every parry needed no thought. The knights realized too late that the stag they had expected had awoken as something more. Stag's heart, dragon's flame. At the last, Sir Arthur Dane, Sword of the Morning, met Robert's gaze over crossed blades, sweat streaking his brow. "Targaryen blood runs deeper than any story," Dane said through clenched teeth. "Then let it run out," Robert answered, and twisted his blade free, letting Dane's strike glance wide. Sinew bunched, breath hissed. Robert wheeled, and his pommel smashed into Dane's helm. The white cloak crumpled. In the periphery, Robert saw Howland Reed slip a blade through Sir Gerald Hightower's halberd. Ned pressed his advantage against the last. Then there was silence, broken only by the wind's lament at the tower's heights. Robert knelt in dust, breathing smoke and sun. Blood beaded on his knuckles, not his own. He thought he'd feel triumph, but instead a grave hush filled him, deeper than any church. He rose and followed Ned up the narrow stairs, each step echoing like a bell peal. Within, rushlight flickered. The air hung thick with the scent of dried roses and stale water. Lyanna lay upon a feather bed, her dark hair damp with fever sweat. Petals scattered across the pillow, blue-gray blossoms that looked almost bruised. Her lips were cracked, her breath shallow. Yet her eyes opened when Robert crossed the threshold, and for a moment the world stilled. He saw longing there, and distant sorrow, and a resilience that outshone both. He dropped to his knees. Laya. The word splintered in his throat. Rob. Her voice scarcely reached him, thinner than silk. You came too late. An icy spear pierced his heart. No. He reached for her hand. Fever heat met his palm, yet his own skin seemed to cool hers. The ember flared, answering her pain. I'll take you home. Lyanna's gaze drifted to the hammer at his back, rapt but unmistakable. It burns, she breathed. I saw it in dreams. A stag crowned with fire, breaking the night. They called you the prince that was promised. Tears pricked Robert's eyes. I'm no prince, only your betrothed. Promise me, Robert, she whispered. Promise me the flame won't consume you. He could not fathom what she saw lingering around him. Light, smoke, prophecy. He could only clasp her hand tighter. I promise. Lyanna's breaths grew ragged. Ned stood behind, silent, face half-shadowed by a candle glow. Robert felt helpless for the first time since the river. He could shatter crowns and princes, but not mend this fragile body. The Red Priests spoke of gifts of life through flame, but he had none of their rites or words. Yet the ember within stirred. Robert closed his eyes. He imagined it surging down his arm, pooling in his palm, flowing into Lyanna like molten gold. Heat bloomed. Lyanna gasped, back arching a finger's breadth. Robert forced will into the ember. Live, he commanded, though he knew nothing of healing magic, only his unrelenting desire. Light flickered across the chamber. Ned uttered a soft curse. Robert opened his eyes. The hammer burned through its wrappings, cloth turning to drifting ash. Pale fire danced upon the steel, reflecting in Lyanna's wide eyes. She gave a tremulous laugh, strangely joyous, though her breath remained weak. So bright. Robert panicked. Remove it, he thought. Yet the flames did not spread, did not scorch the bedclothes. They hovered about the hammerhead like auroras trapped in metal. Lyanna's fever flush faded momentarily, skin regaining a shade of its old vitality. But the reprieve was fleeting. When the fire dimmed, her pallor returned. Robert, Ned said, voice raw with fear and wonder. What in the seven are you? Robert had no answer. He pressed his brow to Lyanna's hand. The ember cooled, its strength spent. Tears fell freely, and where they touched Lyanna's skin, they glowed faintly, then faded, as though absorbed. Lyanna's eyes lingered on him, soft and aching. Don't let the fire devour you, my love. Her lids fluttered shut, lashes trembling. Breath shuddered, ceased. Robert's heart gave one mighty kick, then collapsed upon itself, leaving hollow silence. At first he did not comprehend. He shook her hand gently, whispered her name, then louder. But death's stillness took no heed. Ned placed a hand on his shoulder. Robert's vision blurred. Heat rushed from him in a torrent, ember cooling to ash. He cradled Lyanna's body, rocking, while dawn brightened the narrow windows. By the time sun flooded the chamber, the hammer's flames had vanished. In their place lay only cold steel, though faint traces of the stag sigil lingered like ghostly scars upon the metal. Robert lifted his gaze to Ned, eyes red. If the gods made me a champion, he rasped, then they are crueler than any Targaryen king. Ned offered no answer. He knelt and pressed 2 fingers to Lyanna's lids, closing them. She is at peace. Robert stood. Pain radiated outward from his core. Not physical, but something deeper, like molten glass hardening too swiftly and cracking. He felt fissures spiderweb across the ember. He feared it might burst, consume him. Yet it merely glowed dully, banked behind grief. "The fire lives," Robert said hoarsely, "but it will never warm me again." He turned, hammer in hand, and walked past Ned, down the spiral, into sunlight that felt no warmer than moonlight. Outside, the white cloaks billowed where they had fallen, stained crimson at the breast. Wind tugged at Robert's own cloak, trying to pull him east, west, anywhere but forward. He ignored it and headed for his horse. Howland Reed watched him approach, eyes narrow. "My lord?" "We ride," Robert said. "North, first. Then to King's Landing." "Men?" "And after." Howland dared. Robert swung into the saddle, the hammer resting across his thighs like a promise unfulfilled. "After," he murmured, and the ember flared in answer. "We find an enemy worthy of burning." PGSQL. The ride north was a journey measured in graves. Every town bore charred farmsteads, every crossroads a gibbet. Small folk flocked to Robert's banners as word spread. Rhaegar dead, rebels victorious. Yet jubilants turned to wonder when whispers followed. Of a warhammer that burned with dawn's own heartfire, of a giant of a man who strode unscathed through flame. Some swore they saw the stag of light leaping above his head on nights when no torches were lit. Robert tried to quell such tales, yet each denial only fed them. When they reached River Run, a throng knelt before him in the rain, pleading for healing. Children thrust crippled limbs toward him. Mothers held feverish babes. Robert felt their desperation claw at him, matched only by his own impotence. He laid hands upon those nearest, willing the ember to spark anew. Once, with a weeping girl whose leg twisted at the knee, he felt warmth flow out and saw color flood her cheeks. But when she tried to stand, her leg remained crooked. He turned away in anguish. If he was Azor Ahai reborn, he was a poor answer to prophecy. No sword of light, no dawn chased away. Only an ember dimming within his chest, stoked by grief, banked by anger. And anger grew. Reports reached him of dragon loyalists massing at King's Landing, of Tywin Lannister's gold cloaks throwing open the gates, of Aerys's pyromancers preparing wildfire caches. Robert envisioned green fire spilling through streets already slick with blood. He remembered the hush on the Trident. He remembered Lyanna's last laugh, bright as cracked crystal. Anger threatened to break its chains. And when it did, Robert feared, the ember would roar to white-hot life. PGSQL. On the eve of their march south, Thoros of Myr sought audience. The Red Priest appeared soaked from cloaked travel, his eyes alight with fervor. He bowed low before Robert. "Your Grace," he began, though no coronation had yet been held. "The Lord of Light has touched you." Robert allowed bitterness to color his tone. He touched and left burns. A trial by fire for sins yet unspoken. "You were forged on the Trident as Lightbringer was forged thrice before it burned true." Robert rose from his camp chair. "Speak plainly." Thoros' gaze fell upon the warhammer, leaning against the tent pole. "You raised that weapon against the Prince of Dragonspawn. In that death flame was set free, yet its true tempering awaits. Your love died in your arms. The hammer burned, but not bright enough. Lightbringer in legend was forged finally with the blood of the heroes. Beloved." Robert's breath left him in a hiss. "You dare. I mean no insult." Thoros' voice trembled with conviction rather than fear. "I speak prophecy. 3 forges, water, beast, and the heart of the beloved. Already you have 2. The river's water and the dragon prince's beastly blood. 1 remains." "Oh." Robert's fist closed round Thoros' collar, lifting him onto toes. "She died by Targaryen imprisonment, not by this hammer. Are you telling me Lyanna's death was a forge for this cursed thing?" Thoros' face reddened, yet his eyes did not waver. "Her death was the flame's price. Now you must accept the burden, else her sacrifice is nothing." Robert released him with a shove. Thoros tumbled, robes tangling. "Get out," Robert growled. "Preach your prophecies elsewhere." Yet after the priest fled, Robert's gaze drifted to the hammer. The metal seemed darker now, veins of char visible only in certain lamplight angles. When he placed a hand upon it, he felt a low throb, like distant drums. The ember answered, pulsing in rhythm. He thought of Lyanna's final words, "Don't let the fire devour you." Did she fear this consummation Thoros described? Or did the gods speak through her, pleading he hold fast to what humanity remained? In silence he vowed, "I will wield fire, but I will remember the hurt it wrought." That night dreams returned. A city of pale stone engulfed in green flame, shadows twisting like serpents, children screaming. Above it all loomed a stagger-crowned figure, hammer raised, flame roaring around antlers. The figure's face was his, yet not his. Eyes ablaze, mouth open in exultant howl. Robert woke drenched in sweat, heart pounding like anvils. Come dawn, all the realm awaited the Storm King's approach to its burning capital. He rose, shoulders stiff beneath invisible weight. He would end the dragon's madness. He would claim the throne. And after he would discover whether prophecy made kings or kings bent prophecy to their will. PGSQL. The march to King's Landing was a collision of summer heat and autumn fear. Roads clogged with refugees. Children gripped mothers' skirts as horsemen thundered past. Robert's banners, crownstag gold on black, fluttered above waves of armed men. Rumors preceded them. Fire would dance down from the sky, wildfire barrels hidden beneath every street, loyalists ready to ignite the city rather than yield. Some urged caution. Robert urged speed. On the 5th day from River Run, they reached the rolling hills north of Blackwater Rush. The city lay ahead, red walls catching evening sun. Smoke rose in thin plumes from the waterfront. Signals or sabotage, none could say. Robert ordered immediate formation. Scouts returned breathless. Lannister colors flew above the gatehouse, doors held open. Tywin had sacked the city already, they said. The Mad King dead upon his throne. Robert felt the ember flare. Victory that tasted of ash. They had raced destiny only to find another took the crown while they dreamt of prophecy. Yet inside the ember flickered colder heat. Dark satisfaction that dragons had been slain, that the line was extinguished, root and branch. All but the children. He remembered whispers of a newborn babe, and his sister hidden somewhere in the keep. The thought unsettled him in ways no adult foe could. Children bore no guilt, yet might bear dragons anew. Ned urged caution again. "We must secure the babes." "Mercy, Robert?" Robert's jaw ached from clenching. Mercy. A noble word. He wondered what Thoros would say of forging steel in Mercy's fire. Yet he knew the taste of Lyanna's death too keenly. He could not suffer dragon seeds to sprout. But he did not answer Ned then. He spurred his horse downhill toward the gate of the gods, hammer glinting red in sunset glow. At the gate, Lannister soldiers saluted. Tywin himself awaited inside, garbed in crimson and gold plate, green eyes flat as coins. "Your Grace," he said, voice smooth as cold wine. "The city is yours." Robert rode past without reply. Inside the walls, carnage bloomed. Doors splintered, shops gutted, gold cloaks dragging chests through bloodless-lit lanes. Firelighters still doused embers. The air reeked of smoke and urine and hot iron. Robert's eyes burned, though whether from smoke or tears he did not know. Nights later he sat the Iron Throne, its jagged spines cold against his back. The hammer lay across his knees, silent. Tywin's men presented proofs of Arius' corpse, of the babes dashed against brick. Robert stared until his vision hazed. Steel seemed to shift beneath him, twisted swords whispering of 1,000 deaths. In that whisper, he heard Lyanna's dying gasp. He wondered whether she would weep or smile to see him here, crowned by death. When the hall cleared, Ned remained, expression a mask of quiet fury. That was no mercy. It was massacre. Robert could not meet his oldest friend's eyes. The city is safe. The realm is safe. At what cost to your soul? Robert's gaze dropped to the hammerhead. No glow. Only cold reflection. My soul burned on the trident, he said softly. What remains is for the realm. Ned spun on his heel and walked away. Footsteps echoed down the hall, leaving Robert alone with steel and silence. He sat thus for what might have been moments or hours. Somewhere deep within, the ember pulsed, not bright, not joyous, but steady. It waited. It always waited. He wondered how many nights he could sit upon this throne before the ember devoured what little man remained. A distant clatter echoed like forges striking in unison. Robert raised the hammer, and in its surface he saw his reflection contorted by ridges, horns of fire sprouting from his brow. He thought of prophecy, of Azor Ahai reborn, hero of light. He thought of children slain for safety's sake. He thought of Lyanna's hand in his. If I am your champion, he told whatever gods might listen, let this be your kingdom. But no, I shall judge you as harshly as any mortal king. The ember stirred at those words, brightening, as if in challenge. Robert leaned forward, placing the hammer's head upon the step beneath the throne. Steel rang dully. Night closed around the hall. Between ragged sword shadows flared a ghostly stag of fire, antlers scraping black banners overhead. Robert watched it dance and wondered whether in the end he would wield fire or be consumed by it. A.K. PGSQL. The small hours before dawn pressed upon King's Landing like a sodden blanket, humid enough that every brazier seemed reluctant to fan its coals into honest flame. In Maegor's Holdfast, the corridors were so still that torchlight pooled without a tremor, as though time itself had congealed. Robert Baratheon had not slept since the hour Ned Stark left the throne room in frosted silence. He wandered the outer balustrade now, a solitary shape cut in moonlit armor, the warhammer cradled against his shoulder. Each breath he drew tasted of smoldering timber, sweetened by summer's last rot from the surrounding city. At the parapet's edge he halted, staring across the moon-shadowed rooftops toward the distant black ribbon of the Blackwater Rush. Ships lay at anchor on its inky surface, silhouettes of masts, still and spindled like the ribs of dead leviathans. He remembered the river's voice at the trident, how the current had rushed around his ankles as though urging him onward. Now, the Blackwater offered only silence, a mute confidant bearing witness to his insomnia. A scraping of leather on stone warned him of a presence. When Robert turned, he found Sir Barristan's Selmy standing a respectful distance away, white cloak draped like evening fog. Barristan's weathered face wore neither reproach nor approval, only a knight's even courtesy. "Your Grace," he murmured, bowing. "Forgive the intrusion. I saw no guards at the eastern wall and feared you walked unprotected." Robert huffed. "Unprotected? A fool who tries me tonight would find himself hammered flat before he knew his mistake." Barristan inclined his head gently. "Even the strongest hammer has need of a whetstone now and again, or of rest at the least." He stepped closer, gauntleted hands clasped behind his back. The moon illuminated his lined brow, lending him the aspect of a venerable shrine statue. "It troubles you, the talk among the princes of the realm?" "Talk." Robert lifted the hammer off his shoulder, letting its weight settle to the stone. "Talk that I am savior or demon, depending on the singer's wine." He spat over the parapet. The saliva drifted down, swallowed by darkness. Let them talk. Words cost little. Man, less than silence sometimes. Barristan's gaze flicked to the hammer. "I stood in the throne room yesterday. I saw what burned on that steel." Robert's jaw tightened. "Magic tricks, a red priest's mutterings. I do not feed on riddles." "Perhaps not," Barristan said. "Yet riddles feed upon us. The common folk whisper that Lord of Light chose you. Some bow already when your shadow crosses a doorway. Men have bent their knees for stranger reasons." Robert paced a slow line along the wall. "If faith makes them obey the crown, let faith reign, so long as law is kept and harvest gathered." Barristan watched him a moment longer, then cleared his throat. "Your Grace, word arrived this hour. Eddard Stark means to quit the city at dawn, taking the bones of those fallen at the tower. They say he will ride north without farewell." Robert stopped dead. Without. Disbelief knifed through stale anger. Stubborn as granite, that one. He pictured Ned's solemn face beneath gray northern sky. His oldest friend turned away by massacre and prophecy alike. A tremor of grief threatened Robert's composure, but he tamped it down. "I will meet him at the stables." Barristan bowed. "Shall I summon an escort?" "No need." Robert hefted the hammer. "This will suffice." He strode from the wall walk, boots striking echoes along deserted corridors. His passage stirred lonely braziers, sending sparks flittering like fireflies behind him. At the foot of the tower stairs he found a single squire dozing, breastplate for a pillow. Robert nudged the boy with a toe. The lad snapped awake, scrambled upright, and blurted an apology. Robert waved him aside and continued into the bailey. Cloaked shapes were already at the stables. 6 Northmen, their cloaks trimmed in white wolf fur, loading packs onto horses road-weary and mud-splashed. Howland Reed whispered to a quiet stable hand. Jory Castle tightened a girth. Ned Stark emerged from within, carrying a long pine box under one arm. No heavier than a sword, yet his face looked burdened enough for a hearse. When Ned saw Robert, his step faltered. The two men faced each other between lantern puddles. Robert broke the silence first. "So you'd ride without a word?" Ned's jaw worked. "I thought to spare us arguments we've aired too often these past days." "You thought to spare me," Robert corrected. He stepped forward, the hammer in a loose grip. "I need not your pity, Stark, only your counsel. A king alone in this nest of vipers will drown before spring thaws." "A king who orders babes butchered needs no counsel of mine," Ned said, voice hoarse. "I cannot watch you tread that path again." The rebuke struck Robert like an open-handed blow. He saw the tower, smelled Lyanna's dying breath. Heat surged. The ember, stoked by fresh shame, licked at his ribs. "You think I relished it?" His voice rang off stable walls. Horses snorted, stamping straw dasho. "Think I wanted their blood on my crown? Wanting matters less than doing." Robert breathed deep. The night's damp air tasted of hay and salt. Slowly he lowered the hammerhead into straw, leaning on the haft, as if it were a staff. "If I let them live," he said quietly, "some bright fool would raise them, claim the dragon's spine. Another war, more fire, more dying. I killed them to end killing." Ned's stare softened a hair, yet sorrow lingered in his eyes. "And if prophecy says different? If your fire is meant for something greater than thrones and feuds?" "Bendiah." Robert's laugh was dry as split kindling. "Prophecy. Songs. They lead us by the nose until we drown in our own legends." He nodded at the pine box Ned carried. "That her?" Ned's fingers tightened on the lid. "Arthur Dane's sword. Dawn. I mean to return it to Starfall." Robert blinked, surprised. He had half expected Lyanna's bones. A knight's sword for a knight's kin. He let silence settle before continuing. "Ride south then, if you must. But once your duty's done, come back. I cannot mend what's broken between us with half a realm twixt our cups." "Ben sir." Ned hesitated, then nodded once. "Swear to me. No more babes." "No babes." Robert's voice cracked, an echo of a promise given in a fevered tower. "No more fire where steel will suffice. I swear it." Ned studied him for a heartbeat, searching for deceit. Whatever he saw, it eased him. His shoulders relaxed. "Then we will meet again, old friend." Robert reached out. Ned set the pine box down and clasped Robert's forearm. The grip felt solid, the first true anchor Robert had touched since the trident. They held it a moment longer than necessary, as though aware the gesture might be their last. Then Ned released his hold, remounted, and trotted out beneath the portcullis, the wolf-head standard half furled behind him. Robert watched until their torches dwindled. At length he turned back toward the keep. The ember burned lower, banked now by the memory of trust regained. Still, he felt the hinge of fate creaking. Each pledge seemed only to tighten prophecy's unseen noose. He wondered how many oaths he could keep before the fire demanded payment again. 2 days later the coronation was announced, though half the city lay in such disorder that banners could not be properly hung. Grandmaster Pycelle bustled like a goose inside the great sept, wringing his hands over cracked marble and broken icons. Tywin Lannister arranged a sea of crimson cloaks to line the nave, a gesture that felt more occupation than celebration. Robert submitted to the tailoring of a new doublet, black velvet embroidered with a crowned stag of brilliant gold thread, but refused a sword or scepter. The hammer alone he would carry. On the morning of the ceremony, a pale mist drifted in from the bay, muffling bells until their clangor resembled distant whale song. The sept's interior blazed with candlelight, yet the shadows above the altar arches quivered, refusing to be dispelled. Courtly lords gathered in pockets, whispering gossip of alliances and potential queens. Robert kept to himself under a clerestory window, ignoring the sideways glances at his improvised regalia. The High Septon arrived last, a corpulent man swollen into his cloth of silver robes, escorted by barefoot acolytes, chanting a hymn to the Seven. Pycelle made introductions, Tywin droned protocols, and Robert found himself ushered before the mother's statue to kneel. As holy oil touched his brow, he felt nothing. No revelation, no heat, only the compressive weight of expectation settling across his shoulders like a monstrous yoke. When he rose, crown on brow, and faced the gathered lords, he caught sight of Thoros of Myr near a side altar. The red priest's eyes shone so fiercely, Robert feared the man might burst into flame then and there. Thoros pressed 2 fingers to his heart, a gesture of veneration that forced Robert to look away. Outside, crowds thronged the plaza. When Robert emerged onto the marble steps, the cheers were thunderous, though tinged with unease. Smoking ruins ringed the skyline. The scent of unburied corpses lingered like foul incense. Robert raised the warhammer. Its head caught the noon sun, gleaming as if polishers had spent weeks on its surface. A cheer rose again, louder. Yet Robert heard undercurrents: fear, wonder, pleading hope. That night, the Red Keep feasted on venison, spiced wine, and an avalanche of honey cakes shipped from Old Town. Minstrels sang 24 songs, half of them newly composed, each praising Robert's strength, Rhaegar's defeat, and a mysterious stag of flame heralding dawn. Robert drank, more out of necessity than revelry. Wine kept his courtiers' tongues loose, revealing where alliances truly lay. He noted which houses laughed too loudly at Tywin's jokes, which eyes followed his hammer more than his crown. And he saw too the subtle flicker of orange behind the black iron of the braziers. Real fire, but somehow always reminding him of the inner flame he carried. Near midnight, Thoros approached the dais, carrying a silver goblet brimming with arbor red. "Your Grace," he proclaimed, voice husky with devotion, "I bring you the cup of illumination." Legend says Azor Ahai toasted his destiny from such a vessel before marching to defeat the darkness. Robert eyed the priest coolly. Another legend. He accepted the cup, all the same, and took a measured sip. The wine stung with spices uncommon in Westeros. Dragon pepper perhaps, or saffron. He swallowed and found the warmth blossomed exaggeratedly, spreading down his limbs like rivulets of molten copper. The hall's torches flared higher. Music rose in pitch. Robert's heartbeat quickened, echoing the hammer's silent drum. "Feel it," Thoros whispered. "A strong vintage," Robert replied. Yet, as the warmth deepened, he felt the ember respond, pulsing brighter. The hammer on his lap tingled as though charged by unseen lightning. Thoros's eyes widened in vindication. Robert set the cup aside, covering his unease beneath a roguish grin. "You'd brew dangerous liquor, priest. Might set a man aflame from inside." Thoros bowed. "That flame is no danger to you, my king. It awaits your will." "Dan." Robert looked away, scanning the hall. He caught the gaze of Stannis, sober-faced at the far table, lips pressed tight. His brother's disapproval pricked like a needle. Not because Stannis mistrusted drunkenness, but because he mistrusted magic. Stannis' eyes flicked to the hammer, then returned to Robert, narrowing as if measuring corruption's reach. Feeling suddenly exposed, Robert rose. "Enough songs," he declared. "Tomorrow, we rebuild." The crowd murmured, Tywin's brow twitched in annoyance. He'd planned another hour of flattery. Robert ignored him and strode from the dais, down the hall, through corridors that seemed to fold into an endless maze. One wrong turn after another brought him to the darkened belly of the Red Keep. A place of oubliettes and crumbling cells. Here the torch brackets lay bare, cold. No one had dared occupy these halls since wildfire stores were rumored to run beneath. Robert leaned on a damp pillar, letting the hush swallow him. In this quiet, the ember talked. He felt its pulse, a heartbeat distinct from his own, deeper, primordial. It coaxed memory, the river's hush, Lyanna's laugh, Ned's look of quiet judgment. Robert closed his eyes. "Are you there?" he murmured. Not to the gods of the sept above, but to the presence coiled in his chest. "Do you answer prayers, or only forge weapons?" The ember pulsed. Then something unexpected occurred. A drifting mote of warmth detached within his mind, shaping itself into a distant sound. It was not words, no language, but an impression. Forge, sacrifice, sword of mourning. Then came a hush, so absolute Robert felt the world tilt. He staggered away from the pillar, shaking like a man freezing, though sweat slicked his brow. "A sword of mourning," he muttered. "Arthur Dane's blade. Dawn's pale edge. Sacrifice." The words braided until they felt entwined with the forging of a weapon. His hammer, burning once more, perhaps needing one last tempering. But whose sacrifice? He had given Lyanna unwilling. Yet the ember whispered, a forging still incomplete. "No," Robert said aloud, voice echoing through empty chambers. "No more blood for your fires." Yet the ember thrummed, indifferent to refusal. Robert felt cornered, as if prophecy tightened its snare with every heartbeat. A sudden urge overtook him to climb the curtain walls, to feel wind and sea spray, to outrun foreordination. But duty tethered him. A realm fractured lay waiting for a king, prophet or no. He returned to his apartments near dawn, shedding crown and boots with careless clatter. Sleep, when it came, was a jagged tapestry of dream. He walked a beach of black sand where waves hissed like serpents. Each wave receded, revealing bones gleaming under starlight. Dragon bones, wolf bones, child bones. Until the sand itself crunched like shattered ivory. In the dream he hefted his hammer and smashed the shoreline, but each strike birthed more bones, rising in spires that twisted into a throne taller than any tower. From that throne a crowned skeleton stretched out charred antlers and beckoned him closer. Robert woke gasping, sheet tangled, heart galloping. Dawn's pale wash slanted through shutters. He swung his feet to the floor, still shivering, though embers of dream already scattered before present urgency. A knock rattled the door, his steward bearing messages. Riots in Fleabottom, grain shortages reported from the Reach, river lords clamoring for restitution for lost sons. Visitors awaited in the solar. Stannis, Jon Arryn, Barristan Selmy, and Lord Renly. Stannis' eye fixed on the empty wine flask, left toppled near Robert's chair. Robert waved aside formalities. "Speak." Jon Arryn, his face newly etched with wrinkles, cleared his throat. "Famine threatens the crownlands. The fields surrounding the city burned during the sack, and food stores were looted. To avert unrest, we must import grain from Highgarden and the Vale at once." "Mamotemar." "Highgarden will ask honeyed concessions," Robert muttered. "Then let them," Stannis said, arms crossed. He carried none of Renly's courtly flourish, only stripped-down practicality. Better gold lost than a city starved. Robert nodded. "See it done." Jon Arryn bowed. Stannis stepped forward. "There is more, Your Grace. Reports persist of a surviving Targaryen son. Viseries, spirited out of the city by loyalists before Tywin's entry. He and the babe Daenerys fled across the narrow sea." "Nepistra." Robert's hand tightened around the hammer's haft where it leaned against the table. "One boy and an infant pose little threat." "Little now," Stannis conceded. "But time ripens every seed. A single dragon's shadow can rally half a realm. I propose a bounty to be posted in Bravos and Pentos." Robert took a slow breath. The thought of more babes hunted sat foul in his gut, a rancid echo of Ned's condemnation. "No bounties," he said. "We'll watch them, nothing more." The hammer pulsed faintly, approvingly or angrily he couldn't tell. Stannis' brows knit, but he bowed his head. "As you command." Barristan spoke next, calm and deliberate. "Your Grace, the city stinks of bodies. Might we allow the Silent Sisters to labor unmolested? Their processions soothe unrest. Have them walk." Robert shrugged. "But let Sel's words guard them. The gold cloaks are stretched thin." Renly, youthful, bright-eyed, seized the pause. "And what of the tourney, brother? A grand celebration will lift spirits, draw coin to the city, and distract restless knights." "No." The hammer's weight grew suddenly unbearable. Visions of knights clashing in merry pageant clashed with the dream-shore bones. A tourney amidst ashes? When small folk scrape for crusts, later, Renly? Renly's smile dimmed, though he hid disappointment behind a courtly nod. As the council dispersed, Robert lingered. His gaze drifted to a map of Westeros unfurled on the table. Small, carved tokens marked garrisons, burned towns, rebel camps not yet reconciled. He reached out, drifted a finger over the Vale, the Neck, the Stormlands. Everywhere he touched felt brittle, like pottery fired too hot. He realized he had no idea how to mend a realm scorched by prophecy and vengeance alike. That evening he convened craftsmen and smiths in the tower's lower bailey. Donal Noy himself arrived from Storm's End at Robert's summons, one arm ending in a stump bound in boiled leather. The old smith bowed low, but offered no pleasantries. Noy had known Robert since boyhood, and saved most words for steel. When Robert revealed the warhammer and spoke of forging a less burdensome weapon, something that could channel whatever fire lay within, Noy listened in thoughtful silence. "Let's give hope," the smith said it at length. "Hammers break. What do you wish to give the realm?" The question stung lightly. Robert thought of how the hammer had shattered Rhaegar, ended dragons, and how hope flickered like dawnfire over that broken breastplate. He glanced to Thoros, observing from shadows, eyes bright as forge metal. The priest would call for a sword, for Lightbringer. Yet Robert sensed that path led to more sacrifice, a bloody road lined with innocent bones. "I will keep my hammer," he decided, "but I'd have it tempered again, strengthened until no man can question its purpose." Noy shrugged. "Then gather coal. We'll need more heat than common smithies dare." They built a makeshift forge in the courtyard, stoking bellows until the night sky pulsed ember red. Nobles gathered on balconies, fascinated and wary. Robert rolled up sleeves, ignoring protests about kingly propriety, and worked alongside Noy, pumping the bellows, turning the head in flame, listening to steel sing. The warhammer glowed first cherry, then bronze, then eye-searing white. Sparks skittered like fire gnats. When Noy nodded, Robert lifted the glowing metal and plunged it into a trough of river water hauled up in cisterns. Steam exploded, cloaking the courtyard in a hissing cloud. From within that cloud the ember inside Robert flared, resonating with the hammer as though an invisible cord bound them. He felt heat rush into him, yet not to burn. Instead it settled, melding steel's memory with blood. When the vapor cleared, he held the hammer aloft. Its surface shimmered with ripples uncommon to forged iron, patterns like flowing script. Gasps rose. In the mirrored steel Robert glimpsed his reflection, eyes gleaming as if lit from within, hair backlit by unseen flame. For a moment he feared he had crossed some final threshold, surrendered wholly to the fire. But the hammer's pulse steadied, gentle, and the reflection cooled to a simple man's visage again. Donal Noy exhaled. "It will not break now, not under gods or men." Thoros stepped forward, awe saturating his features. Lightbringer reborn, though in the shape of Judgment's hammer. He touched two fingers to the head, flinched at lingering warmth, and whispered a prayer. Robert wiped sweat from his brow. His limbs trembled less with exertion than with the sense of destiny's vice tightening another twist. Yet he felt, too, a subtle clarity. If prophecy knit itself around him, perhaps smithing allowed him to shape its edges. He would forge meaning from flame, not bend knee to it. Word of the forging spread faster than wildfire rumor. Within a week, peasants spoke of the Hammer of Dawn, and acolytes of Azor insisted the forging marked the third tempering, river blood, Lyanna's heart, and white-hot flame under Blackwater sky. Thoros petitioned to carry the hammer before Robert in processions. Robert refused but allowed the priest to anoint its haft with mirish oils, said to deter shadowbinders. Still, not all saw blessing. Septon Luther of Stony Sept penned a scathing letter condemning abominable magic in the hands of a king. Ravenborn, the letter raged through noble courts, souring fragile alliances. Robert faced the first wave of clerical denouncements with brash dismissal, but soon realized anger bred faster than wheat. He ordered Pycelle to convene septons, offering reparations to burnt temples, promising repairs. Yet inside, he felt the ember tighten again, alive to conflict like a hound scenting prey. As fall advanced, gales blew salt inland, and the Blackwater's estuary swelled. Refugees again pressed city gates. Robert's reforms, grain barges from the Reach, new city watch recruits, eased tensions in part, but Tywin remained restless, balking at expenditures that brought no immediate gold. Renly filled courts with laughter and pageant. Stannis measured ledger after ledger until his eyes pinked with strain. Jon Arryn alone managed to coax lords into uneasy compromise. But even he confessed over supper. He feared the realm's wounds required more than policy. One crisp morning, a raven arrived from the Eyrie, wings draggled by a squall. The message bore an Arryn seal, Lysa Tully with child. Jon Arryn's jaw slackened at the news, pride softening the edges of perpetual worry. He asked leave to visit the Vale, strengthen his house's future. Robert granted blessing with rough camaraderie, though his chest tightened at one more piece of old life departing. That afternoon, alone in the throne room, Robert lifted the hammer toward the great windows. Sunlight danced across the head in ribbons of rainbow fire. He tested its weight. It felt balanced, eager. Vision ghosted across his sight. A battlefield beneath a sky blanketed in rolling black cloud. Lightning speared earth. Shapes emerged. Frozen whites, eyes blue as glacial moons. Robert stood amid them, the hammer blazing with daylight. Every strike shattering fleshless limbs like glass. The enemy shrank from him as mortal armies never had. Strange. These foes felt destined, the perfect adversary for a king forged in prophecy. The vision snapped away. Robert faced only empty flagstones. He dragged a hand across his face. North, he whispered. Was that where the real war brewed? Against dead men, not dragon heirs. Days turned to weeks. Snow flurries dusted the city in pale flecks, vanishing on sun-warmed slate. Word came of Ned's safe arrival at Starfall, then of his slow journey north. Robert sensed distance growing like a chasm. He drafted letters, 5, 6, tossed them aside. What words healed wounds wrought by dead babies and burning prophecy? More immediate matters pressed. Rebels in the Dornish marches refusing fealty, Greyjoy fleet sightings off Cape Wrath, rumors of sellswords gathering in Qohor under a black dragon banner. Each crisis forced decisions. Robert wielded hammer on council table figuratively, smashing indecision, commanding swift action. Tywin approved results, though he sniffed at the king's nightly forge sessions, where Robert shaped spearheads to donate to battered garrisons. A king need not sweat like common blacksmith, Tywin needled. Robert ignored him. Sweat cleared the mind better than Cersei's cunning smiles. Cersei did not. Tywin's daughter arrived by gold barge cascading silk banners. Robert met her in Throne Hall, where she knelt with grace rehearsed. Green eyes held storms behind calm. Council and realm alike buzzed with the Union's political shrewdness. Lannister gold married to Baratheon brawn. Robert studied Cersei's beauty, sun-kissed hair, lips promising honeyed nights, and felt nothing stir but suspicion. Yet alliances stitched kingdoms. He could not wed Lyanna's shade. He agreed to the marriage pact amid cheering courtiers. The Ember's response perplexed him. It neither flared in protest nor warmed in approval. It lay watchful, as though waiting to see which fires this new union would spark. On the night before the wedding, Robert walked alone along the battlements. Lightning flickered over the bay. Silent heat, lightning foretelling no storm. He found Thoros praying before a brazier, murmuring in guttural High Valyrian taught. Sparks lifted in spirals. "Will your God grant me blessings on marriage?" Robert asked wearily. Thoros looked up, eyes reflecting embers. "If the queen bears your son, it may be the prince that was promised, born of king's hammer and lioness fire." The words unsettled Robert. "More prophecy," he growled. "I'll have a son, not a weapon of fate." Thoros smiled thinly. "Sometimes they are the same, sire." The ceremony proceeded. Candles dripped wax like tears. The whole city watched. As he bound his wrist to Cersei's with ribbon of Baratheon gold and Lannister crimson, Robert felt the ribbon warm, though torches stood distant. He thought of Dawn's forging legend, of heroes plunging blades into lion hearts. He forced the thought aside, whispered vows. Cersei's perfume overwhelmed, orange blossom, hint of clove. He wondered whether the world smelled thus to Rhaegar before the hammer fell, Rick promising, but fleeting. Their bedding feast lasted until sunrise. Robert drank, but never dripped into stupor. The ember within burned liquor to restless heat. He glimpsed Stannis frowning over the riotous bundling, Renly cheering, Tywin watching every gesture with hawk precision. Cersei met Robert's kiss with practiced smile, yet her eyes seemed to appraise him like a merchant evaluating coin purity. In private chamber, after attendants left, Robert eased silk from her shoulders. She traced the scar beside his right nipple, a souvenir of boar tusk, and asked soft questions about pain and triumph. He answered monosyllables. When she touched the hammered sigil pendant resting against his chest, the metal warmed, though her fingers felt cold. Their coupling was vigorous yet hollow. Robert sought comfort, but found only friction. He fell asleep, thinking of a blue winter rose. Autumn bled into winter. Snow covered the King's Road north of Riverlands. Word reached him. Ned Stark had returned to Winterfell, declined repeated invitations south. Robert wrote at last, ink spattered from trembling quill. "You are my brother in truth. Come spring, ride south. Help me steer this maelstrom." He sealed it with black wax, and hoped Ned still believed in kingship's redemption. Meanwhile, to the east, whispers thickened of a sellsword company styling itself the Golden Fist, marching under a prince's banner. Spies reported viceroys among them, still boyish, but crowned with arrogance. Robert wrestled with the thought of assassination, then recalled his vow. Instead, he dispatched envoys bearing offers of amnesty, titles, safe return. The ravens vanished into winter storms. Answers never came. One night Robert dreamed again. Frozen tundra beneath emerald sky. He stood among a ragged host. Northmen, wildlings, even red priests, chanting in unison. The enemy advanced. A horde of white shadows, skeletal horses breathing frost. The hammer of dawn blazed, each swing releasing fan-shaped beams of golden fire that carved swaths through the dead. Yet for every dozen whites destroyed, 20 more rose. Robert felt exhaustion gnawing at sinew, the ember within flickering like a candle in gale. Then, a figure emerged from black pine. Ned Stark, roaring, dawn in hand, sword radiant as morning star. Side by side they pressed enemies until the dream burst in white fire. Waking, Robert sat up, heartbeat thunderous. Cersei dozed beside him, oblivious. He swung legs from bed, pressed fist to sternum, feeling the ember throb. "Dawn," he whispered. Arthur Dayne's sword. Oh. In dream, Ned wielded it ablaze. Could that be the missing piece? Sword of mourning tempered by friendship's steel. Not beloved blood. Decision ignited like sparks. He would ride north come spring, speak prophecy with Ned face to face beneath heart trees. For now he must shore the realm's foundation. Money, grain, justice. So war in the far north did not find a fractured south. Over the next months he labored. Gold lines opened to rebuild city walls. Craftsmen mended flea-bottom wells. He oversaw tribunals stripping corrupt gold cloaks of rank, and visited orphanages bearing barrels of dried cod. Each axe steadied the ember until it felt less like wildfire and more like hearth flame, existence rather than consumption. Yet each night, after wine and counsel, he took hammer to practice yard, swinging until arms burned. The head left faint afterglows in the cold air. Stroke paths of golden ghosts. Baratheon sparred him with blunted steel, amazed at Robert's stamina. "You fight as though time itself pursues you," the knight remarked between bouts. Robert only grunted, driving the hammer down. In late winter, ravens finally brought word from Winterfell. Ned would travel south when roads thawed, bringing contingents of Stark men to bolster the royal guard. Relief flooded Robert so strongly he had to brace against a wall. Even Stannis smiled faintly at the news. Renly clapped a table and proposed a melee of the wolf and stag to mark Ned's arrival. Snow melted. Crocuses pushed through palace gardens planted hastily by Tyrell gardeners. Ships from Dorne appeared bearing spiced wine, peace offerings after months of standoff. Robert greeted them with open trade terms, though knelt each night before bed to ask whatever gods might attend a half-hero, that no more innocence be demanded of his flame. On the first clear day of spring, as Robert stood upon the outer wall, watching ice floes drift toward the bay, a rider galloped across Dragonstone Causeway, banner streaming black and red. Viserys' forces had taken Qohor, allied with warlocks of Qorth, and now boasted unsullied ranks, unstoppable if left unchecked. Robert felt the ember flare hot. Response to Dragonseed rising. He realized that mercy, too, required steel. That night he convened war council, Tywin pushing for preemptive strike, Stannis counseling blockade, Barristan pledging Kingsguard steel if called across the narrow sea. Robert listened, gaze on the hammer. In the polished head he saw reflection of 7 men, himself, and 6 gathered counselors, arrayed like petals around flame. Choice weighed upon him. Cross seas and risk realm leaderless? Or wait, hope prophecy guided Viserys elsewhere. He closed eyes, letting embers speak. A pulse thrummed. Then memory rose. Dream tundra, whites, dawn's light beside hammerfire. The enemy beyond the wall felt greater than any exiled prince. Viserys was noise, but winter's darkness was the song. Prophecy perhaps, but prophecy anchored in ice, not dragon flame. Robert opened eyes. "We fortify," he declared. "The prince across the sea may play at conquest. Let the free cities check him. Our battle lines lie north where winter gathers teeth." Counselors stared. Tywin's lip curled, but he bit back argument. Stannis inclined head. He saw logic, if not prophecy. Barristan accepted without question. Thoros, who'd slipped into the hall unannounced, smiled as though hearing secret verses. Robert dismissed them. Alone, he lifted the hammer and traced the stag sigil with thumb. "North," he said again. "Ice and fire meet there." Lightning whispered beyond clouded windows. Silent, but promising storm. Weeks later, ravens from the wall confirmed dire news. Ranging parties lost, wildlings pouring south, dead men rising in haunted forest. Maester Aemon's parchment trembled with urgency. Robert called banners, sending word to every lord from Dorne to the Neck. Supply the night's watch, dispatch builders, sharpen axes. Many grumbled at cost, some refused, skeptical of dead men tales. Robert hammered wax seals onto decrees, threatening forfeiture for noncompliance. Cersei argued, "Why bleed coffers for ghost stories?" Robert answered only by pointing to the hammer. Flame flickered within the steel, faint yet visible to those attuned. She fell silent, though chill lingered in her green gaze. Spring thaw had hardly cleared the King's Road when Ned Stark arrived at the head of 600 Northmen clad in grey mail. They entered through King's Gate, banners snapping in fresh wind. Robert descended steps to meet him halfway. No crown, only leather jerkin and the hammer of dawn. Ned dismounted, leaving horse to a squire, and clasped Robert's forearm. The crowd erupted in cheers, though many looked uneasy at sight of 2 warlords reunited. That night, under the weirwood transplanted to the godswood of the Red Keep decades past, Robert and Ned knelt on moss. Moonlight pierced crimson leaves like shards of silver glass. Robert set the hammer upon roots. Ned laid Dawn beside it, the sword pale as first snow. Dreams lead me north, Robert confessed, voice rough. I see armies dead and alive. I see you wielding dawn alight, and me this hammer forging daylight against night. Ned inhaled, studying the heart tree's face, sap tears trickling. Old Nan told such tales, white shadows in the long night. Perhaps the wheel turns again. Will you stand with me? Robert's question hung between them like breath in winter air. Ned turned, meeting his gaze. Always. He placed a hand atop Dawn, palm steady. Arthur Dane said it was forged from the heart of a fallen star. Perhaps star steel and stagfire were meant to cross. Robert set his hand on the hammerhead. The ember leapt, sensing kinship in the pale sword. Warmth flowed between weapons, coursing up their arms. Leaves above rustled though wind was still. Robert felt the heart tree listening, ancient, wordless. Then let prophecy come, Robert said. We'll meet it together. A calm settled over him, unfamiliar yet welcome. For the first time since the trident, he felt more man than weapon. If fire demanded forging, he would shape it with brotherhood. The hammer's pulse steadied, harmonizing with a gentler beat. In the combined silence, Robert heard faint whisper. Lyanna's voice? Or simply wind through leaves, promise me. He nodded once, eyes damp. In the quiet that followed, Ned drew Dawn halfway from scabbard. Pale light shimmered bright as dawn indeed. Robert lifted the hammer. Where sword met hammer, an arc of rose-gold light flickered, painting the heart tree's face in fleeting brilliance. Crimson leaves fluttered as though applauding. Somewhere distant, a raven cried 3 harsh notes. Warning or vow? They sheathed blade, grounded hammer. Moon dipped west, painting the godswood in silver hush. Robert spoke at last, voice low. Ride with me to Winterfell when summer's end turns leaves red. We'll see what waits beyond the wall. Ned nodded. And if prophecy falters? Robert managed a weary grin. Then we'll drink, curse the poets, and forge new tales. Dawn's pale edge faded to dull silver. The hammer of dawn cooled to dark steel. Yet both bore subtle afterglow, promise of reckoning to come. In stillness of ancient trees, 2 friends stood side by side, neither hero nor king in that moment. But men, resolved, uncertain, human. Above, stars wheeled on silent axes, indifferent yet watchful. Somewhere in frozen north darkness stirred, sensing twin lights flaring on horizon. But night still reigned, and journey yet ahead. Robert Baratheon inhaled the scent of weirwood sap and coming frost, tasting purpose sharper than any wine. He turned toward the palace lights, toward politics, marriage, gold and blood. But behind every mundane trouble burned a distant horizon of white dread, and within his chest beat ember steady, shading toward flame. The realm would have its Azor Ahai, perhaps, or it would have its king. Robert intended to be both or neither, whatever fate required. He hefted the hammer once more, feeling its forged weight balanced to hand like destiny's own promise. Together with Ned, with Dawn, with all flawed humanity clinging to hope, he would march north when winter called. Until then he would rule, rebuild, and remember that fire, left untended, devours. Somewhere far beyond sight, in Cahor's shadowed temples, a boy with silver hair and burning pride plotted banners and bloody victories. Across cold seas, shadows drew breath, and snows began their slow descent. Yet in the godswood of King's Landing, beneath blood-red leaves, 2 weapons slumbered side by side, hammer and star steel, waiting for dawn that would either break darkness or shatter upon it. And in the hush between heartbeats, Robert Baratheon finally heard his own breath no longer echo inside a forge's roar, but settle into calm. Fire not quenched, but mastered, blazing steady against the long night to come. And say, DJC, Bible, in law. Oh, what are the BUA? PGSQL. Spring's last breath drifted across the reach, buoyed by fields of bright daisies and ripening barley, when Robert Baratheon's host began its slow, thunderous roll north. No fanfare marked their departure. Tywin Lannister contrived a hunting excursion in the Kingswood, and Cersei convened a feast for Dornish envoys, each charade designed to mask the imminent flight of a king whose destiny lay beyond polite intrigue. Yet word of marching hoofbeats slipped through the city's alleys all the same, passed in hush from tradesman to beggar, from septon to smuggler. By dawn on the second day, the caravan had slipped free of Flea-Bottom's cramped tenements and poured onto the King's Road, an iron torrent sworn to winter's heart. Robert rode at the van astride Thunder's Mane, a roan destrier whose bulk dwarfed most chargers. Each stride jarred the hammer across Robert's back, yet the weapon felt less burden than promise, its subtle warmth a steady drum against chainmail. Beside Robert, Ned guided a dappled gray. Dawn sheathed at saddle, its pearl pommel catching every stray sunbeam with ghostly flicker. The two men rarely spoke beyond clipped commands. Conversation seemed unnecessary when their silent accord ran deep as bedrock. Instead they listened. Clatter of hooves, creak of baggage wagons, snap of pennons emblazoned with the crowned stag and the dire wolf. A third sigil fluttered now among them. A new banner of hammer over rising sun, dawn gold against black. Robert had tried to quash it, but soldiers painted shields in secret. Faith, he discovered, thrived on denial. Early marches proved gentle. Riverlanders greeted the passing columns with deference. Harvest wagons parted to allow the King's Road. By night, Robert met with local lords at cobbled keeps, distributing grain IOUs and hammering out defensive pacts. Many offered fealty quickly, more fearful of whites than Lannister wrath. Yet suspicion lingered. Tales of Azor Ahai reborn still sounded dangerously foreign in Westerosi ears. Time would quell doubt, Robert told himself, or time would prove prophecy's weight in fire and blood. 10 days north of the capital rains came hard, sluicing down from bruised clouds, turning the road to pudding. The hosts slogged onward, cloaks sodden, yet morale remained surprisingly stout. Every leaguesman had seen the hammer flare at least once in twilight drill, and rumor claimed the mere glow repelled fevers. Robert encouraged such stories, for a frightened soldier swung dull steel. A hopeful one might cleave shadows. On the 11th night, campfires hissed under rain tarps. Robert sat with Ned and Donal Noy, their supper a circle of damp bread and smoked mutton. Donal mended a length of chainmail by candle stub, fingers deft despite missing hand. Ned sharpened Dawn with Whetstone's steady rasp. Robert watched sparks fly off star steel edge, bright as dying meteors, and felt the ember within reply, subtle and longing. "Steel sings," Donal remarked, voice a low rumble. "Your hammer's jealous." "Let it sulk," Robert said, but he lay a hand upon the hammer's haft. A familiar pulse greeted him, as though the weapon possessed an animal mind aware of rivalry. He turned thoughtful eyes to Ned. "How fares the blade in your dreams?" Ned eased Whetstone from steel and exhaled. "Quieter," he murmured. "It no longer screams. Perhaps it waits for snow." Robert nodded. He lacked Ned's gift for prophetic slumber. His own visions came wild, seldom twice the same, but every dream ended beneath winter stars, a wall of ice towering, a breach torn by pale riders. Robert feared that breach more than the golden host of visories across the sea. On the 12th dawn, scouts returned bearing tidings. A village smoldered 10 miles off-road, corpses strewn in fields, their wounds rimed in unnatural frost. Robert left the column under Stannis' sober command and rode with a hand-picked outrider troop, numbers small enough to outrun rumor, large enough to deter ambush. Rain eased into gauzy mist as they cantered across gentle hills. The village, no more than 20 sod huts round a withered heart tree, lay ruined. Chickens lay frozen mid-strut, feathers rimmed in white rime though temperature hovered mild. Smoke rose lazily from charred thatch, but fire seemed to have fought ice here, both leaving half-finished signatures. Robert dismounted among the dead. A young boy, perhaps 10, lay against a pigpen, mouth agape. His eyes glowed faint blue still. When Donal pressed a gauntlet to the corpse, frost crackled up the steel. Robert felt the ember flare. Heat muzzling throat, but he forced calm. "Whites," he muttered, "too far south for comfort." One rider gagged behind him. Ned knelt beside another corpse, an old woman, arms twisted to unnatural angles. He closed her eyes and whispered prayer to the old gods. "Burn them," Robert ordered. Torches were brought, pitch poured upon hay. Flames licked damp straw, sputtered, then bit with fervor, chasing chill vapors into sky. Yet where orange tongues touched corpses, blue flames leapt, hissing. The fire burned hotter than any wood fire. Robert stepped close, hammer raised, feeling ember and corpse flame resonate like dual choirs. Smoke writhed upward, curling into vague antler shapes that dissolved on wind. When the last shape faded, Robert tasted copper on his tongue and turned away. That night he addressed the host. Torches rimmed a makeshift amphitheater of wagons. Men crowded shoulder to shoulder, shields propped underfoot. Robert stood upon a trestle table, dawn and hammer crossed behind him in the care of squires. He spoke plainly. Of the dead walkers, of winter's teeth gnawing at green lands, of how southern quarrels must cease lest cold silence swallow all. He bade every man treat frostbite wounds with flame, every unit carry tinder wax dotting, and he exhorted them to remember their loved ones along the wall, for that line was all that kept this horror from hearths. Not one voice heckled. Even hardened sellswords listened wide-eyed, for rumor outran truth. Yet truth outshone rumor here, burning white and cold. 2 nights later the host reached Moat Cailin, gateway to the north. Stony towers loomed out of fog like broken guardians. The next boggy odor filled nostrils. Frogs croaked from unseen pools. Robert ordered bivouac short of the causeway, cautious of ambush. The crannogmen of House Reed emerged from mists to greet them, Howland's kin, faces painted green and brown. They brought tidings. Whites sighted in the barrows east of Widow's Watch, spears of obsidian found buried in peat, old as the first men. That evening Howland led Robert and Ned to a hidden fire pit, where elder Crannog seers waited, ringed by driftwood effigies. There they told a saga. Of a hammer of dawn prophesied when the wall's spell weakened, when gray steel and star steel must unite beneath a red star to rewrite the night. Robert listened, weary of yet another prophecy draped across his shoulders. Yet the words fit too neatly. Gray steel for his house's tempered iron, star steel for dawn. The seers presented gift. Shards of dragon glass wrapped in lichen. Robert accepted, feeling each shard whisper chill sorcery. They left at first light, causeway mist swallowing them like specters returning to bog. Crossing into the north, air turned crisp, horizons vast. Pines bristled along ridges, heavy with cones. Children of the host, mouths open to snowflakes, laughed despite grim march. Robert found their laughter a balm. When Winterfell's towers crept above treeline, sunset cast them amber, and smoke from forges curled like offerings to twilight gods. The gatehouse trumpeted arrival. Ned entered first, greeted by Master Lewin, Lady Catelyn, and a jostling pack of young Starks, Robb tall and eager, Sansa poised, Arya scowling at her gown. Bran perched on stable fence like talkative raven, Rickon chasing direwolf pup. Jon Snow lingered half-step behind, eyes gray and thoughtful. Lyanna's ghost flitted across Robert's mind. Joan's subtle Targaryen features pricked buried grief. Robert dismounted heavily, clasping each child's shoulder. When he ruffled Jon's dark hair, the boy smiled faint, and Robert felt ember flicker, almost remorseful. Supper in Winterfell's hall roared with boar ribs, turnip stew, and sour brown ale. Harpists plucked forlorn chords, dogs napped by hearth. Robert carved haunches, jested with Robb over sword forms, scolded Arya for kicking under table, and matched Joan's restraint with gentle inquiries. How he liked life in red-bricked hall, whether he preferred bow or blade. Jon answered with quiet precision. Each word reminded Robert of Ned's childhood stoicism. Later that night he found himself wandering the Heart Tree courtyard, ale jug in fist. The Godswood's silence draped him. He knelt before the Heart Tree, laid hammer across roots, and whispered apology to Lyanna, for all that was, for all that must be. Bark knots twisted like grieving eyes. Breeze rattled crimson leaves, a sound like sighing reply. Days passed in planning. The wall sent ravens confirming new sightings. Ghouls in beech groves, white wolves pulling sledges with skinless riders. Lord Commander Azor Mormont pleaded for reinforcements. Robert dispatched 300 men, obsidian tips issued, maesters loaded with wildfire potions. Stannis would oversee Eastwatch provisions. Renly remained in south to maintain court illusions. Tywin, hearing only fragments, protested the king's folly, but Robert answered by courier. Winter's threat dwarfed Lannister purse. While ravens flew, craftsmen in Winterfell's smithy forged more dragonglass spears, under Donal Noye's gaze. Each casting required temper of king's hammer. Robert struck anvil beside apprentices, sparks reflecting in his beard. Song had spread of such anvil strikes burning brighter than forge coals, and indeed each blow set predator eyes gleaming from forest gloom. Whether beasts or elder spirits no one dared guess. One evening, Bran stumbled into courtyard trailing a cluster of younger lads. He begged to watch the hammer's forging light. Robert indulged, seating the boy on overturned cask. As Robert raised the hammer above glowing billet, Bran gasped. Later he whispered that streaks of light shaped antlers leaping over an icy hill. Robert felt chill. A child's vision often skirted prophecy. He tousled Bran's hair and bade him keep that image safe. At moon's waning, a southern messenger arrived breathless. Lord Tyrell pledged a host to sail for Dragonstone, to block visories if crown willed, but only if king returned to hold throne. Robert read parchment thrice, then crumpled it. Thorny roses grew thorns sharper than northern spears. Yet he could not ignore politics. His absence stretched now 5 weeks. He summoned council in Winterfell's solar. Ned, Stannis, Donal, Howland, Maester Luwin, even Jon, who lingered in doorway until Robert beckoned. 2 walls confront us, Robert began. Ice in the north, gold across the sea. The realm cannot fight both at once. We choose our ground. He turned to Stannis. Dragonstone remains your seat. You will sail south, hold gulls at bay. Tyrell may posture, but true might flows from Storm's End fleet. Make them respect it. Stannis straightened, satisfied by trust shown. As you decree. Ned, Robert continued. You and I ride for the wall with our vanguard. We test these dead things, gauge truth. If winter proves myth, we pivot south. If myth proves truth, he lets sentence hang. Ned nodded grimly. Jon shifted, eyes alight. Robert studied him. You crave the watch? Jon's cheeks colored. I do, your grace, but my lord father insists I am young still. Robert grinned. A boy grown early in heart. Very well, ride with us as squire. See the watch firsthand, then choose. Ned's brow furrowed, but he said nothing. Jon bowed stiffly, hiding a smile. Plans set. Stannis departed at dawn, naval standard snapping. Winterfell's courtyard felt emptier for his rigid presence gone. Robert turned thoughts north. He spent final evening quietly with the Stark children. Arya insisted he teach hammer twirl. Bran begged stories of Summerhall. Robert obliged both, though sorrow shadowed jest. When small folk lanterns guttered, he strolled ramparts with Ned. Your boy has part of Lyanna in him, Robert said, voice hushed. Wild heart caged behind honor. Ned halted under torch. Jon is not hers, brother. I know. Robert's gaze swept snowy fields. But I see her spirit, honest, quick to laugh. His throat tightened. Guard him. Ned's hand fell upon Robert's shoulder. As I guard you. Next dawn they rode out. Robert, Ned, Jon, Donal, Howland, and a wedge of North's hardiest, bannermen of Karstark, Glover, Mormont. Cold, sharpened cheeks, breath cloudy, timberline thinned, hills smoothed to white whalebacks. At Torhin Square, they passed a field of cairns ringed in frost. A child's doll impaled upon spearpoint, jutted from drift, eyes eaten by ravens. Robert dismounted, studied scene. No burn marks, corpses likely risen and wandered. He ordered cairns torn down, remains burnt fully. Smoke curled upward, ghostly. He swore shapes danced within, but dismissed it as grief. As days wended, frost deepened. Lakes froze glassy, reflecting aurora flickers at night. One midnight, as host camped under brittle stars, Robert awoke to distant horn blasts. Patrol scrambled. Robert seized hammer and strode beyond firelight. Snowfields glimmered. Blue shapes moved at horizon. Whites advancing in stiff ranks, eye sockets aglow. Number impossible to count. Robert's blood surged, ember flaring. He shouted, "Rally!" Men spilled from tents, bearing obsidian and torch. The clash erupted amid moonlit snow. Hammers rang, obsidian cracked brittle bone. Each strike Robert delivered exploded whites into shards of hoarfrost. Dawn, wielded by Ned, shone like captured star, blade humming with each arc. Jon fought beside his uncle Benjen, arrived from ranging hours prior, dagger of dragonglass swift as lightning, though fear whitened his cheeks. Yet righteous fury met relentless tide. For every enemy shattered, two stumbled forward. When Robert's arms numbed, he bellowed retreat to ridge where torches ringed supply wagons. Howland fired flaming arrows into surrounding snowdrifts, igniting pitch seeds stashed earlier, bog oil that burned cold ground. Blue fire swept ranks, halting whites. Acrid fumes sent men coughing. Amid chaos, Robert and Ned found each other, backs against wagon. The hammer's glow dimmed, wavered. Dawn flickered. Panic licked edges of Robert's sanity. Was prophecy a lie? Then a horn's long note sounded from east. Shapes charged down slope, giant bears clad in mail, riders brandishing flanged maces, Mormont's men, led by Lady Mage, wild hair streaming. Behind them thundered a dozen wildlings wearing weirwood masks, axes of bronze. Together they smashed flank, driving wedge into whites. In that moment, Robert felt ember swell anew, stronger than before. He swung hammer overhead. A pillar of gold-white flame erupted from steel, fanning outward like sunrise. Whites within arc dissolved to steam, their icy bones melting. The sight stilled battlefield. Silence fell but for crackle of torches. Frost mist cleared to empty plain of blackened snow. Remaining whites crumbled like rotten bark. Robert sank to knees, chest heaving, hammer's glow fading. Ned knelt beside. "You call dawn itself," he whispered. Robert looked to eastern horizon. Faint light there heralded real sunrise, pinking snowfields. "Maybe dawn called me." He rose slowly. Men watched in awe mingled with dread. Jon's eyes brimmed tears. Relief? Terror? Robert laid hand on boy's shoulder. "You did well." Jon shook head. I froze. "Only fools never fear." Robert mustered a tired smile. "Courage is fear mastered." They buried losses, or burned them, lest they rise. 12 men had fallen. Among them, Sir Roderick Castle. Robert stood vigil as pyre flames licked pre-dawn murk, each spark reminding him of lives he bore in his flame's shadow. On reaching the wall 5 days later, they found Castle Black swollen with refugees. Cattle lowed in cramped yards. Women cooked oatcakes in smithy. Lord Commander Mormont greeted Robert with equal parts gratitude and grim worry. "You came just in time," he said, beard rimed with hoarfrost. Scouts spotted an army of thousands beyond the Milkwater, marching slow but steady. Inside Lord Commander's solar, they convened war council. Rangers, northern lords, even Tormund Giantsbane under guest right. Wildlings allied for survival. Maps unfurled, paper edges brittle, lines of forest and ice drawn with trembling quills. Robert traced gloved finger along potential breaches. "We cannot hold if entire wall crumbles. We must strike beyond, disrupt captains before they gather." Madness. Sir Alizar Thorne barked. "March into snowblind hell." "War," Robert replied coldly, "is seldom comfortable." He turned to Ned. "Take rangers, scout the Frostfang valleys. Find where these pale ones mass. I'll ride east along wall, rally Eastwatch. We meet again here in 10 days. Jon, hearing this, stepped forward. "Let me range with them." Ned opened mouth to deny, but Robert lifted hand. "The boy fought at my side. Let him earn Black Brother's trust." Against fatherly instinct, Ned relented, though his eyes warned Robert of responsibility. Dawn they parted. Ned, Benjen, Jon, and ghostly white direwolf ghost slipping through gate. Robert with Mormont Donal Noy. and a ragtag cavalcade of spearmen. Wind atop the wall howled unceasing. Ice underfoot cracked like distant thunder. Robert felt hammer hum, as though attuned to cold's malice. Each dawn he paused, staring out across dead lands. White dunes under torn sky, bizarre auroras crawling. He thought of Cersei's perfumed chambers, of King's Landing's filth, of banners rippling red over Kuor Dire. All seemed small. At Eastwatch, they discovered port sealed by pack ice, yet fishing skiffs still slipped through channels, bringing grim news. Ships of black sails patrolling shivering sea, Viserys mercenaries scouting alternate landing near Skagos perhaps. Robert cursed, braided fates. He urged Raven south. Recall Tyrell fleet, warn storms and galleys. On fifth day, as Robert inspected seaward ice, distant figures crested ridge to west. Riders, silhouettes against dusk. War horns blew hasty challenge. Robert strode forth, hammer raised. The riders dismounted 50 paces away. Their leader removed hood. Melisandre of Ahai, red hair streaming like comet tail. Her eyes glowed with contained furnace. She bowed with ritual grace. Azor Ahai, she greeted. Your flames draw those who serve. Robert's jaw clenched. I serve none but realm. Realm burns in shadow until Lightbringer dawns. She gestured to hammer. But Lightbringer's forging incomplete. Donal growled. We've heard prophecy enough. Melisandre's gaze slid to him. The smith speaks, yet sees not the steel beyond eye. 3 forges, 3 deaths. 1 remains. There be more knife. Robert stepped closer. Snow crunching. I sacrificed riverside, I sacrificed in tower. I tempered under forge. No more. The final sacrifice must be one of living fire, she said softly. A heart that burns for you. She looked toward Eastwatch courtyard where men set campfires. Robert followed her gaze. Jon Snow tending embers, face orange lit. Robert's blood chilled, ember flared in denial. Never, he rasped. Melisandre's smile saddened, as if pitying blind child. When darkness rises, choices shrink. Remember this. She turned, ignoring watchmen's blades, and vanished into swirling snow with her retinue. That night Robert stood on parapet, mind racing. Could prophecy demand Jon? Did Lyanna's echo lead here? He refused to believe cosmos so cruel, yet he feared prophecy like creeping frost. Once it seeped under door, no hearthfire banished it entirely. Meanwhile, Ned's ranging bore fruit and sorrow. On 9th day, watchmen spied smoke trailing east. Ned's party returned battered. Bran carries letter historically, but not now. Benjen wounded severely. Jon held him on horse. Their tale. A legion of whites encamped in ruined Weirwood Grove, ringed by others not yet undead. Wildling captives awaiting transformation. At center stood others. White-haired walkers in crystal armor, eyes daylight blue. Among them loomed one giant figure wielding jagged ice halberd. The Walker King. Ned's party harried flank, freed some captives, but were pursued by monstrous polar bear white. Benjen saved Jon but cost spear through thigh. Inside Eastwatch Hall, healers tended Benjen. Robert listened to recount. Ned's description of Walker King chilled soul. Antlers of ice protruded a long helm. Mockery of stag crown. Robert saw cosmic irony. Winter mock stole his sigil. He slammed fist on table. We strike him before his horde swells further. Plans crystallized. A night assault using firepots, catapulted from sledges. Obsidian-tipped cavalry led by Mormont, Hammer and Dawn at spearhead. Wildlings guided secret path through Duskwood Pass. Jon insisted to join. Robert hesitated. Saw Lyanna's spirit again. Relented conditionally. Jon carry horn to signal if cut off. They marched under Aurora, swirling green and violet. Snow muffled hooves. Wildling guides muttered prayers to horned god. As they neared Grove, sound of crunching bone underfoot grew. Frigid cemetery ground shattered by footsteps. Cloaked in shadow, men took positions along ridge. Catapults were cranked, pots lit. tar stench thick. Robert felt hammer heating, though no forge near. Ice crystals vaporized off head. With roar he charged down slope, hammer blazing. Fire pots arced overhead, shattering into green conflagrations. Grove lit hellish. White shrieked, flesh igniting. Obsidian arrows whistled, felling pallid warriors. Robert burst into clearing. Hammer aflare. Struck first walker. Ice armor exploded in shards, body evaporating. Dawn followed, Ned carving white shadow into motes. But the Walker King advanced, halberd sweeping arcs that froze air. Robert met blow. Hammer hailed sparks, but shock jarred bones. Ember flared, countering chill. He swung overhead. Walker parried, frost peeling across hammerhead. Dawn darted, slicing through halberd shaft. The king backhanded Ned, Starsteel blocked, sliding him yards. Jon blew horn once. Retreat cue for archers repositioning. Robert pressed, anger fueling. Around them fire found little purchase on Walker's aura. Flames dim. Hammer's glow sputtered. Melisandre's warning nod. Final forge. The Walker's eyes gleamed like twin moons. Reflection of Robert's crown melted in them, derisive. He realized brute strength might fail. Jon, seeing father struck, sprinted into melee, dragonglass spear couched. "Jon, back!" Ned shouted. Too late. Jon hurled spear. It struck Walker's chest, cracking but not shattering. The Walker King seized shaft, tossed boy aside. Jon flew, landed heavily, wind knocked. Walker lumbered toward Jon, halberd remnant raised. Robert moved, but snow sucked boots. Prophecy coils tightened, sacrifice hovered. No. He surged, interposing hammer between halberd and boy. But Walker sidestepped, ice blade descending. Robert deflected, yet tip grazed Jon's rib. Blood spattered stark on snow, steaming crimson. Jon gasped. Robert felt hammer scorch. Heart in throat, he swung with fury, unlike any trident blow. Hammer collided with Walker's helm. Steel shrieked, ice antlers shattered. Yet Walker remained, cracks glowing azure. Dawn flashed, Ned leaping, driving Starsteel through fissure. A sound like glass choir shattered sky. Walker exploded in storm of shards, blue flames extinguished. Frost shockwaves swept clearing. Fires flickered out. Grove plunged into sudden dark, broken by Hammer's ember glow and Dawn's pale light. Silence. Whites beyond Grove collapsed inert, puppets cut from strings. Survivors gaped. Robert knelt by Jon. Blood-stained boy's furs but wound shallow. He pressed palm, ember warmth cauterizing flesh. Jon hissed, but bleeding slowed. Robert whispered, "You will not be Forge's price." Ned approached, face pallid. "The king is down, but others remain." He gestured to Arctic horizon, where dim figures retreated into swirling snow, their blue eyes distant sparks. The war was not won. They burned Grove, using Walker King's shattered ice for pyre core. Blue flames devouring Weirwood's corrupted heart. Robert watched, hammer rested on knee. Ember within felt changed. Deeper, tempered by refusal to sacrifice. He realized prophecy might bend not to death, but to choice. Fire demanded, but man could negotiate. Eastwatch hailed victory, yet count of dead reached 4 dozen. Among fallen Lady Magie Mormont, struck by ice shard shielding wounded ranger. At her wake, Robert pledged bear cub carved from dragonglass to Lyanna Mormont. Ravens flew, news racing to King's Landing, to Riverlands, to Pentos markets. Some hailed dawn of new age. Others whispered King dabbled in sorcery obscene. Tywin growled in council, but could not silence hero's song. Across sea, Viserys smashed goblets, ranted about stolen birthright. Warlocks of Korth promised icefire solutions. Weeks later, repairs on wall began. Steel reinforcements, runic glyphs etched with dragonglass dust, smiths directed by Donal under Old Nan's half-remembered tales of builders. Robert oversaw each job, sleeves rolled, hammer used as tamping tool. Legend grown yet remained pragmatic. Spring's buds whispered south, yet north remained bound in ice. Robert gathered Ned and Jon on rampart one star-clear night. Above them, aurora painted sky blood red, a new omen. Robert spoke. Dark has teeth still, but we know it bleeds. Our task now, forge realm into blade keen enough to pierce it. Ned nodded. First, we must unify lords behind cause. Fear of Lannister divides them. Then I return, Robert said. Reclaim throne not with pomp, but with truth of what we've seen. Let those who doubt stand watch one night upon this wall. Jon gazed across forest, ghostly glimmer in gray eyes. And me? You'll stay, Robert replied. Learn watch ways. They need heart unbound by southern game. He clasped Boy's shoulder. I'll call when dawn's final battle nears. Jon's smile held both honor and sorrow. Robert turned southward, hammer glowing faint in night wind, mind heavy with tasks. Convince court, pacify Tyrell and Lannister, repel Viserys' fleet, return with unified kingdom before next winter wave. He knew paths deep, yet ember pulsed resolute. Flame mastered, not consuming. He was king, hammer-bearer. Perhaps Azor Ahai. But first he was man who refused prophecy's cruelty. Fire would serve life, not devour it. At dawn he rode, leaving walls looming shadow, carrying news of shards and hope. As hooves clattered down icy switchback, first sunlight kissed Hammerhead, sparking brief halo. Behind, Ned watched friend descend, dawn resting against palisade. Above them, red aurora faded into pale wash, like embers banked for another night. But somewhere in heart of snows, blue eyes reopened, shards knitting, whispering of next chill wave. The long night was far from over. Yet for first time in living memory, dawn had struck true, and its echo marched south, in form of a king whose hammer shone with promise no dark could soon forget. K.A. Jundi. PGSQL. Sunlight slanted through the crooked pillars of Eastwatch's ruined east curtain as Robert Baratheon swung into the saddle. The hammer of dawn buckled across his spine like a second spine forged of living light. Around him, the wind hummed with cold brine and spruce resin. Gulls wheeled in blinding arcs above the shore ice, calling farewell in voices raw as scraped iron. Behind, the wall soared, giant ribs of frost streaked gold by newborn day. Its shadow, pale but palpable, stretched south across the camp and over the waiting ranks. 200 hand-picked riders in black and gray surcoats, northern runes chalked on leather, obsidian spearheads glimmering at saddlebows. They called themselves the Dawn Vanguard now, a badge Robert had neither coined nor revoked. In war names grew like moss without leave. Ned Stark rode forward and offered one last piece of counsel, voice pitched low so the men might not hear the doubt inside it. Remember their fear, he said. Speak truth plain, but cloak it in policy, else the small folk will swallow only dread. Neorsan, Robert gave a crooked grin. I'll wrap it in enough barley subsidies and forgiving of tithes to sweeten even Cersei's temper. Then, sober, hold here. 10 days of watch, no more. If I've not returned by then, we'll send ravens west and light the King's Road beacons, Ned supplied. You've said it twice already. Then you know I trust your stubborn head. Robert leaned in the saddle closer. Guard the boy if darkness circles back faster. He's more than he knows. Deun. Ned nodded, gray eyes solemn beneath the weight of promise. Jon will be kept from any forge that wishes to melt him. A beat, then softer, ride swift, brother. And so Robert wheeled Thunder's mane, broke into a loping canter along the frozen strand, and the vanguard followed, churned snow fanning behind like the wake of ghostly galleys. Their passage cracked mirror-thin ice rafts. Sea smoke drifted in ragged banners. By sundown the wall was only a blue bruise against northern horizon, and the first stage of the Hammer King's return to flame-lit court had begun. 2 days south he glimpsed the narrow spire of an abandoned watchtower, gilded in sunset. Ravens perched in its jagged windows. Robert raised fist, signaling halt, then spurred up slope alone. Inside, Corpses sat propped like mummers left mid-performance. 3 men in watch blacks, cheeks glazed white, throats raked open. But the startling thing was the chalk scrawl behind them. A crude crown above a crescent hammer, both drawn upside down. Beneath it, a single line, spidery and uneven. Ice breaks. No sign of white corruption. Just murder and message. Robert's jaw knotted. He set the tower alight as he rode away. Smoke twisting into red dusk like a funeral pennant. Beyond Last River, their path crossed Carhold levies marching north, with wagon loads of salted pork, chainmail patch repaired by lamplight. The levies cheered to see the king riding into danger, but fear flickered in their faces. Robert paused long enough to share rough strategy. Burn every cairn, scatter every barrow diggers unearth, muster under Winterfell's banners within a fortnight. He left them a letter for Karstark elders bearing his black seal, and 2 shining dragonglass daggers for their captain. He learned later those gifts, and that letter sparked a column of 800 more riders on the road by week's end. In dark times, the simple sight of fire given rather than demanded turned hearts. South of the neck, the King's Road revealed its green veins again. Pine and birch spangling banks where moss drank meltwater. But the road itself remained churned mire from the army's earlier passage. Wagon ruts froze by night, cracked by day, as though the land could not forget weight of prophecy that had trampled it heading north. Robert kept to half-marches, drilling the vanguard in cavalry wheels, dragon-glass volleys, hammer-spear tandem charges. Each dusk he dragged them to a halt, unleashed them to cook and jest, then joined them around central blaze to hone his own weapon strokes against makeshift posts. The hammer glowed faintly each time dusk edged full dark, a reminder that south still held its share of shadows. On the 9th day, a winter gale boiled out of the sunset sea, flinging needles of sleet sideways. They took shelter in the holdfast of Goldgrass, a timber palisade overlooking the fever water. Old Lady Norrin, who ruled it with iron ladle, insisted on feeding every man thick potato stew and rye ale. Afterward she led Robert alone to her hearth and produced a chest, sealed for 20 years. A gift, she said, from her husband who fell in Robert's rebellion. Inside lay a cloak of sky-blue silk, stiff with age yet still striking. Its clasp was wrought of 2 interlocked antlers over a rising sun of beaten gold. "He thought you'd make something finer than a killer with a hammer," she said. "He wrote that if the realm ever needed light, you'd wear this." Robert's throat tightened. He draped the cloak over his plain wool mantle and left 3 black stags, coin newly minted with flame hammer sigil, upon her mantle. When the gale passed, they pushed on, passing trickles of refugees bound north. Small folk families fleeing tales of whites, told by Carhold riders. Robert shared bread, but urged them to Winterfell, not Eastwatch. "King's justice stands behind its walls," he pledged. Some recognized him by cloak, many by hammer. Tears mixed with gratitude and terror. He promised barns and seed come spring. He had no idea how, but he promised, and his ember believed it could bend lords or dragons to supply. They reached Moat Cailin at mid-morning of the 12th day. The causeway towers stood manned now by reed bowmen, reeds bound in mats among battlements to break wind. Howland waited beneath portcullis, gray eyes measuring. "No new whites," he said, "but a raven from the south, Tywin calls banners, claims unsullied ships sail the gullet." He handed over scroll sealed with red wax, shaped like lion's jaw. Robert cracked it and read as his horse stamped frost. The words glittered with the Lord of Casterly Rock's ruthless diplomacy. Suggestion: the king must return at once, else inconvenient rumors of sorcery might rattle already trembling allies. There was more. Cersei's queenly health, delicate in your protracted absence, and Jan Royce had convened lords declarant questioning Jon Arryn's regency competence. Robert folded the parchment square and tucked it beneath pauldron. The cub thinks himself grown lion. He thanked Howland, left a small pouch of obsidian arrowheads, and pressed south without delay. 3 leagues later, scouts spied smoke clouds writhing over distant tree line. Fresh charcoal black, not cooking gray. Robert signaled gallop. They burst from pines onto a burned hamlet still crackling. A ring of thatched cottages fused into charred slag, corpses piled atop one another like cordwood. Their flesh was blistered to bubbling pitch, yet a handful of remains lay oddly intact. Faces twisted in terror, but eyes ice blue, unscathed by flame. Robert's stomach clenched. Fire that killed men left the walker touch beneath. Someone had sought to purge infection and failed. Donal Noy knelt by a body, found puckered wounds left by slim crossbow bolts. Lannister make, he judged grimly. It seemed Tywin had sent silent hunters to cull walkers by burning entire villages. Effective, perhaps, but monstrous, and breeding dread that the crown could ill afford. Robert ordered a burial pit, scraped under the still frozen sod. As soldiers hacked with mattocks, he built a second pyre for the half-whites, lighting it personally with the hammer's tip, after whispering a prayer of gentle mercy. Ash snowed on men's pauldrons. Robert's anger snowed heavier in his chest. That evening he penned 2 letters by campfire, one to Tywin in cold courtesy, demanding halt to such purges, another to Storm's End instructing Renly to ready scribes for a realm-wide proclamation of unified defense, hammering blame to no single house. He sealed each with flame hammer wax, feeling the weight of kingship grind his bones like millstones. The vanguard crossed into the riverlands, just as a tar-purple dawn bled over mist meadows. And in at the Kneeling Man, Lord Edmure Tully sat breakfasting with Blackwood and Bracken emissaries, mid-negotiation of ancient feud. They all rose dumbstruck at Robert's muddy arrival. Robert accepted hot tea, then spent 3 breathless hours bartering ceasefires amid the hiss of kettle and clang of thawing roof icicles. Blackwoods would supply wayfarers' rest with barley. Brackens would yield charters for obsidian mining rights in barren hills. If whites gained the frontier, must stand as one. He coaxed grudging oaths from both by promising future tourney at River Run and stationing of 2 Dawn vanguard companies in shared barracks. Shared blood toughens faster than drawn blood, he told them. When he remounted, Edmure touched his arm. Rumors say you bear flames strong as dragons. Is it true? Robert's answer, he struck the inn's cracked hitching post. The hammer did not blaze, but sparks danced like new stars and the rotten timber split clean. Edmure's expression turned to startled respect. Robert smiled wearily. Showmanship had its place. South of Harrenhal, the land opened into flat brown patchwork, where last of winter lingered only in ditch shadows. Horizons shimmered with dust plumes, armies massing. Robert's scouts galloped back. Tywin's banners encamped at God's Eye, more than 20,000 swords. Command pavilion gilded with lion rampant. Robert's jaw tightened. He could ill afford pitched quarrel yet. He diverted east through farmers' lanes, sending Raven to announce parley on neutral ground. The ruins of Byford, 5 miles off ridge. Next dusk Tywin arrived, accompanied by 50 crimson-cloaked knights, gold lion helms polished like mirrors. Robert brought only Ned's cousin, Sir Helman Tallheart, and Donal Noy. They met in shattered Great Hall, where ivy straggled through collapsed roof. Lanterns threw unsure light over broken mosaic floor. Snow sifted in drifts. Tywin studied Robert's ragged beard, mud-caked boots, sun-stiff cloak. You look more wilding than king. Robert thumped hammer butt on stone, crack echoing. A king who stands. Better than one who hides behind unsullied cell spears. Tywin dismissed jibe with flick of glove. Reports exaggerate. A token force of eunuchs sails for Kuhor. Likely a feint, yet your leave has galvanized enemies. Lords murmur the Iron Throne is empty of rule. Rule requires more than velvet cushions, Robert said. He recounted Walker King battle, raised palm still scarred by frozen halberd cut. Why you burn hamlets? True war marches of ice. I need the realm unified, not spooked. Tywin's gaze sharpened. You speak of dark fables. My hamlet purge contained contagion. Nisro. Robert stepped closer until Hammerhead nearly brushed lion armor. Your purge fed fear. Fear feeds, Walker whispers. Burn bodies, aye, but not living souls. Heat flared in his words, lanterns flickered. Knights shifted uneasily. Tywin weighed silence like gold coins. At last. Prove the threat legitimate to every maester and lord, and the realm will rally. Until then, Lannister must guard its own with means at hand. Robert exhaled, controlling Ember. I ride to King's Landing to convene great council, share witness from the wall. I ask your swords at my back, and coffers open for dragonglass mines. Terms? Tywin asked. You will retain wardenship of West. Your debts postponed 2 harvests, and Cersei's heir, if she carries son, shall stand in line of succession after mine. Tywin's tilt of head showed calculation. A steep gift for Phantom Frost. A lion's price. Take it or face winter alone. After a brittle pause, Tywin nodded once. Done. They clasped wrists, iron and gold. At parting, Tywin glanced at Hammer. Pray your dawnfire outshines rumors of sorcery, or all this unravels. Robert's laugh was a bear's rumble. Rumor is winter's cloak. Truth is its teeth. He strode out into snow, leaving Lion's standard behind. 3 days east. Scouts reported smoke off Duskendale Harbor. Black galleys, bearing dragon standard. Robert spurred to see Harrow turn. Vantage high on Sea Cliff. Below, 6 lean warships lay at anchor. Sails furled. On deck commanded a tall, pale youth. Silver hair whipping in salt wind, purple cloak billowing, a spyglass mark of his arrogance. Viserys Targaryen had come screaming for crown far sooner than expected. Robert's gauntlet tightened about Hammer. He had no fleet, only vanguard horses and Tywin still north of God's Eye. But delay risked Viserys slipping to Dragonstone, forging foothold with disaffected lords. Robert could not abide another front as winter drew. He summoned Donal, outlined plan. That night under starless sky, they crept along cliff path, carrying long coils of oil-soaked rope and bundles of pitch. Below, docks were lightly guarded, 36 unsullied ringed pylon. Vanguard archers belly-crawled through marram grass on bluff, knocked obsidian-dipped fire arrows. At Robert's arm signal they loosed. Shafts hissed, striking rope bundles tossed by sappers onto decks. Flame bloomed red, then strange blue where dragonglass melted iron nails, searing hull planks. Unsullied formed rings, but fire raged too swift. Sailcloth ignited. Masts became pyres. Viserys shrieked orders from quarterdeck, hair gleaming like ghost, but sailors leaped overboard. Fire arrow struck mizzen. An instant of blind whiteness strode, Hammer's memory echoing. Then ship's powder magazine erupted. A shockwave spat flaming shards skyward. Robert watched from cliffs, flames ghosting his gaze, expression neither triumphant nor cruel. Come dawn, charred wrecks listed half-sunk. Viserys clung to floating spar, pale eyes incandescent with hatred as Tyroshi brig hauled survivors. Robert allowed escape. Dread of dragon whelps across sea served his narrative of mounting threats. Yet as wind drove smoke inland, he felt uneasy lifeless simplicity in burning foes unseen. Still no word of Daenerys, the younger dragon. If she sailed another route, realm might face twin scourges. Vanguard pressed onward. Outside Maidenpool, outriders encountered column of Tyrell knights draped in flowering cloaks. Sir Garland the gallant approached under truce banner. He rode adorned with green steel pauldrons shaped like thorny vines. "My lord father bids parley," he called. Robert studied him. No malice, only cautious courtesy. Over campfire that night, Garland delivered Mace Tyrell's offer. Highgarden would bankroll dragonglass foundries, send grain north, but sought marriage betrothal between Princess Myrcella, Cersei's unborn yet rumored daughter, and Garland's youngest brother, Willis. Court intrigue manured fields of cooperation everywhere. Robert agreed in principle, disclaiming final word until Queen's belly proved fortune. Garland smiled, impressed by plain dealing. He gifted Robert a pomander of arbor spices, to remind you spring still exists. Robert inhaled nutmeg-scented warmth and thought of the frozen trenches beyond the wall. The vanguard arrived outside King's Landing under dusk sky streaked blood crimson. Blackwater's estuary steamed with ship traffic. But lion, rose, and stag banners all flew peaceably. Gatehouse horns blared welcome. City smallfolk erupted in throng of cheers and apprehension. They had heard of ice demons, of burning Targaryen fleet, of a king wielding sunfire. Now they saw a mud-caked giant in tattered sky-blue cloak, riding a foam-flecked charger, raising hammer that shimmered faint as twilight star. Some knelt, others shrank. Robert felt each gaze like weight across shoulders, but he kept head high, riding straight for Red Keep. Inside, halls rattled with bustle. Cersei appeared at top of grand stair in russet silk, belly barely rounded beneath cincture. Pregnant indeed, her smile tight as drawstring purse. She descended, courtiers parting. Robert bowed but not deeply. "I've returned with news you won't like," he murmured. She brushed copper curl from brow. "I've had my share in your absence." That night council gathered. Tywin had arrived earlier with elite lion guard. Jon Arryn returned from Vale, weary. Grand Maester Pycelle coughed dust as he unfurled raven scrolls. Robert stood at head of table, hammer propped near hearth but within reach. Between torches and tall windows, blue night pressed like flood tide. He spoke for an hour. Of Walker King, of Frostfang army, of dawn and hammer calling flame, of the burning of Viserys fleet, of Tyrell, of Blackwood bracken and obsidian mines. He spared no gore, yet gilded no threat. He ended with demand. Each lord contribute 1/5 of standing forces to form winter host under joint command. Each granary tithe to night's watch. Each maester circulate treatise on white prevention. He asked for faith and coin. Silence followed, thick as tallow smoke. Cersei's jaw clenched. Renly tapped finger on table, calculating flamboyant speeches to follow. Pycelle cleared throat, but caught Tywin's eye and shrank. It was Queen of Thorns, Olenna Tyrell, long rumored arrived to supervise flower politics, who broke hush. "Ice zombies," she cackled, then leaned forward. "I've lived through 2 kings and enough treasons to pad a septon's sermon, and I say if my roses must die in snows, so be it. But I want proof thicker than your beard, your grace." Robert lifted hammer, gestured to Ned's cousin Helman, who had accompanied him south bearing rune-etched chest. Helman unlatched lid. Inside lay the Walker King's shattered helm, ice shards fused by frost magic, still glimmering faint blue. When lantern light touched, vapor curled. Gasps rippled. Olenna reached gloved fingertip, touched, snatched back with hiss. Cold, burned through leather. Proof enough. Tywin rose slowly. "The throne will fund dragonglass operations in Crakehall Cliffs. Casterly mines bear volcanic seams once scorned. We will not scorn them now." He flicked glance at Cersei's midriff. "And the air within will be raised in realms secured from shadows." One by one lords nodded, some grudgingly, many pale. Robert's shoulders eased fraction. He laid hammer across council table like treaty quill. "We march in Moon's 4th quarter. Before then, each of you send 100 men to Dragonstone to shatter remaining Targaryen holds. Viserys will strike again. Better we cut wings early." "And then afterwards," Cersei's voice silken. "And when your Walker King rises anew, where will you stand, my husband, on wall or throne?" Robert's gaze met hers. "On both if needed. But I believe Walker heart now beats slower thanks to Dawn's kiss. We have window to prepare." He softened despite tension, placing hand on her belly. "And I intend to meet our child alive." Cersei's expression thawed a sliver. Whether for babe or calculation, none could say. In nights following, the city transformed into forge. Bells tolled not for weddings, but for meltings. Smithies hammered obsidian into arrowheads. Apothecaries brewed wildfire salt paste. Septons preached unity sermons. Even brothels offered free meals to Night's Watch volunteers. Robert walked among districts in plain cloak, dispensing coins, jokes, and occasionally hammer-point justice to curb extortionists. Once he found a group of street urchins painting stag, crowned with flaming antlers on a wall. He offered them more lead paint, and new boots if they covered every slum corner with same. Let hope outrun dread, he told them. Within a week, half the city was stenciled. Yet south dangers mounted. Ravens reported Targaryen loyalist riots in Sunspear. pirate fleets massing in stepstones. Robert convened Second Council, appointed Davos Seaworth, risen to Lord of Rainwood after smuggling onion ships north, as Master of Ships. Davos promised to bring Storm's End and Valyrian fleets together to bottle coasts. Meanwhile, Jon Arryn read intelligence that warlocks of Korth sought dragon eggs to trade visories. Robert authorized Ironbank loan to hire cell sails to intercept. Amid whirlwind came a raven from Winterfell sealed in brown wax. Jon Snow had taken vows at the Wall, styling himself Shield of the Realms. He refused lordly offers, choosing instead to lead a ranging of new recruits along Fist of the First Men. Ned's accompanying letter bore quiet pride and stark worry. Robert read by candlelight, ember warming at Jon's decision. Prophecy remained uncertain, but choice guided by bravery offered alternate forged path. He penned reply of fatherly pride and hung it with Raven. Heart heavier yet lifted. Later that night he sat alone in Tower of the Hand study. Jon Arryn had lent chamber, admitting to himself bone-deep fatigue. He leaned hammer against desk, rubbed temples. A flicker of warmth bloomed. He lifted eyes. In fireplace stood Melisandre, flame cloaking her like shawl, though Great's fire had burned low. Eyes of living embers regarded him. "You spurn forge and yet still shape flame," she said softly. "But darkness stirs anew. Shadows lengthen behind lioness womb." Robert rose, muscles humming. "You speak riddles when realm needs clarity." She stepped close. Smell of cinnamon and smoke curling. "Your child may blaze bright. Too bright, one must die so the other may dawn." Robert's fist clenched. "I will not sacrifice wife or babe, nor snow, nor any I love." Melisandre's gaze betrayed no surprise, only sorrow. "Then pray light alone suffices." With that she stepped backward into hearth. Flames roared white, then guttered to soot. She was gone. Robert stood trembling. The ember within pulsed turbulent, like forge shaken by mountain quake. But he set jaw. Prophecy served him, not master. He spent dawn forging letter to every sept-in realm, decree outlawing burnt sacrifices, offering royal reward for captured priests preaching such. Tywin raised brow, but sign. Faith must be pruned from fanaticism. Spring storms battered city walls, yet grain barges hailed from Old Town, from Arbor, from Shield Islands. Common folk lined quays to unload sacks, singing hammer anvil chants invented by dock urchins. Cersei's belly swelled. Robert visited nightly, telling tales of wall battles to unborn. One eve as he spoke of dawn flashing, babe kicked. Cersei allowed small smile. Robert kissed roundness, whispering, "Fire within but tempered." At month's third week, a black sail appeared upriver. Sigil of three-headed dragon. Panic shivered along harbor, but warship proved single scout. Emissary from Pentos carrying parchment sealed by Prince Illyrio of High Magistracy. Viserys, licking wounds, now styled himself V. Rhaegar Reborn, demanded parley on neutral Braavosi Island. Else he unleash sleeping terrors. Robert laughed. Tywin advocated blade. But Jon Arryn counseled cunning. Accept parley, send envoy, stall while fleets gather. Robert agreed, naming Sir Barristan Selmy chief delegate with Maester Pycelle, and two faceless men disguised as scribes. Gift from Braavos ironically. Ironbank desired winter not slow trade. As strategy consumed days, word reached capital. White Harbor erupted in riot when red priests burnt crannogmen accused of ice possession. Manderless hanged priests, sparking outcry from Melisandre's scattered cult. Flames of our lore flickered towards schism. Robert dispatched Lord Davos to mediate. Onion Night with humble faith might calm. On the first mild night of true spring, capital celebrated planting festival long delayed. Lanterns studded streets, overshadowing charboned bricks. Robert walked incognito with Ned, arrived 2 days prior to brief small council. They drank spiced wine, watched jugglers dressed as polar bears juggling apples. Children rushed to fling petals at Hammer King. They guessed despite Hood. Robert laughed until cheeks ached. In this mirth he felt why war mattered. Nights like this had to endure. As festival bonfire towered, Sparks swirling, Robert drew Ned aside. "When I ride north again, throne seat mustn't sag. I want you to remain hand." Ned stiffened. "Duty to kingdom, yes. But south coils with vipers. You've tamed worse in council." Robert clasped friend's shoulder. "If I fall in ice, crown passes to Babe and Myrcella's line. They'll need wolf hand." Ned sighed. "You speak as man reading own gravestone." Robert's grin crooked. "No. I speak as smith, forging spare blade." He raised wine. "To dawn that lasts." Over coming weeks, council resolutions churned like tide. Dragonglass shipments rolled south from Westerlands, and north from Dragonstone, newly captured by joint Tyrell Stannis fleet. Robert toured foundries, his hammer anointing first molds. Sparks cascaded. He recalled forging Warhammer in Storm's End youth, and marveled how life loops on itself, forging again and again. Then, crack of dawn, 6 days hence. Cersei went into labor. Storm clouds banked channel. Thunder shook keep. City held breath. Robert paced corridor outside Queen's chambers. Hammer across knees, Tywin and Pycelle murmured distant behind. Hours crawled. Finally, cry of newborn pierced stone. Midwife stepped out, face pale. "A girl, my king?" Red gold hair. Robert entered. Cersei lay exhausted but glowing faint. He cradled infant, swaddled in stag-crowned blanket. The babe stared with eyes neither green nor blue, but curious hazel flecked gold. Ember inside him flared warm, not hot. "Bright as sunrise," he whispered. Cersei managed weary nod. Tywin looked upon girl with tight satisfaction. They named her Shira, old Stormland's word for dawn over sea. In courtyard, priests of 7 rang bells. Small folk hurled flower garlands into gutters. Melisandre nowhere seen. Nights later, Robert took Shira to Godswood. He laid hammer at roots while moon poured milklight on weirwood face. "No forge for you," he told daughter. "You'll be flame of hearth, not blade." Leaves rustled like applause. Ember hummed restful agreement. Yet even amid joy, ravens shrieked. Viserys landed on Skagos with company of then cannibals claiming dragon blood would tame north. Robert convened war council, but his mind felt clearer. Walker threat paramount. Dragon pretender but Ember glint distraction. He dispatched Bolton and Karstark levies with Elaine Mormont to crush incursion, while he prepared final muster. Summer would soon arrive by calendar, though not by feel. White ravens from Citadel predicted long winter indeed. Robert studied star charts with Maester Luwin, noting red comet due in sky soon. Omen of many colors. Some would call it sword, others bleeding scar. Robert sighed. Symbols never ceased. On anniversary of Trident, he gathered realms lords on field of Ashford. 35,000 foot, 12,000 horse, 4,000 arbalesters, 100 giants, courtesy of Free Wildling Pact, stood ready. Smiths issued obsidian. Robert rode dais, hammer raised. He looked across Helmet Sea, saw fear but iron spark in every eye. In booming voice, he declared, "We march not to die for songwriters, but to live for mornings. We will be dawn's vanguard for our children's children." Cheers rolled like thunder. At dusk host set south again. This time northwards only in spirit, training in winter combat before eventual return. Robert watched columns file, heart heavy yet hopeful. He felt prophecy coil less like noose, more like braided cord he could hold. That night Ned asked, "Do you think we'll ever know peace?" Robert stared at campfires flickering against star-littered canvas. "Peace is moment between hammer strokes," he said. "Our task is to keep beating iron until blade lies strong enough that next hands need not lift hammer." He nudged embers with boot, sparks spiraling upward like lost prayers. "And perhaps when I am too old to lift this," he touched Warhammer, "I'll sit in Storm's End, drinking mulled ale, while children laugh at tales of ice devils." Ned chuckled. "You'd be bored within fortnight." "Aye, but I'd welcome the boredom once." In distance, a wolf howled. Gray wind perhaps, scouting with Rob's outriders. Echo carried across meadow, merging with clank of armor, creak of siege carts, low murmur of thousands on cusp of greatest war Westeros had seen since Age of Heroes. Robert closed fist around hammer handle. The metal was warm, not hot. Within, embers settled to steady coal, waiting patient. Dawn would come again. He would meet it on his feet, hammer high, and hold it long enough for all to see. And if darkness returned with talons sharper than before, he would answer not with sacrifice but with the living fire of will. A hammer stroke of humanity refusing to bow to either gods or ghosts. The long night might stretch yet, but for the first time in countless ages it faced foes, united not by fear, but by the stubborn blaze of a king who chose life even in the crucible of prophecy.